online, and these are the epic stories that have shaped the world we now live in. So please join us for the most heart-pounding podcast in history. It's already got 2 episodes out, and it's already ranking as the #1 podcast in the history category, so I'd be honored if you go check it out and give it a follow and a rating. There will be new episodes every Wednesday, and stick around to the end of this video to hear a quick sample. All links down below. Enjoy. Without boring you with all the minor details, I ended up in some unfortunate employment circumstances back when I was in my 20s, and I turned to Craigslist to solve my money problems. I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, no wonder you ended up with a scary story, but honestly, it was a pretty sweet gig for a while. I posted just about everywhere, advertising just about any kind of service that kept me fully clothed and out of jail, and to my surprise, the thing that really took off was the courier service I offered. I got a call from a guy who sold what I lovingly call nerd stuff. He imported rare video games and trading cards from Japan, sought out rare consoles, hardware, and prototypes in the US, and then sold them to collectors around the tri-state area. He made a lot of money doing it, but he didn't have the time or the employees to get all his deliveries done without a little help. And that is how he ended up becoming a regular customer of mine. I supplemented my between jobs income with other stuff, but my nerd guy would call at least once or twice a week, and by month 2 of being out of work and relying on Craigslist, I was basically working for this dude on a regular part-time basis. He even used to tip me sometimes when he made a big sale, and for the most part, all the deliveries he sent me on went nice and smoothly. Except this one delivery which almost went spectacularly wrong. So every now and then my nerd guy would trust me with the delivery of something big, and said half the reason he tipped me is because I did my job and delivered the card or game or whatever instead of just stealing it. He was paying me about $20 for local deliveries, more for ones that were further out, but the cards that I was delivering were worth hundreds of dollars to the right people. I didn't have any inclination to rob this poor guy, I just wanted an honest pay for honest work, but he appreciated the honesty nevertheless. But the trust that formed also led him to trust me with more and more valuable items, until this particular time when he said the card in my possession was worth almost $1,000. The high-value stuff didn't bother me. I don't mean to sound cruel, but I was delivering to a lot of out-of-shape nerds that barely saw sunlight. Even if they did pull a gun on me and try to rob the card or whatever it was, I don't think they'd have the strength to pull the trigger or the eyesight to even hit me. No, I'm kidding, of course, but you get my point. I wasn't scared of getting robbed. Not until my nerd guy said something about me having to be careful. I asked why I'd need to be careful, and he told me no particular reason. It was just a delivery to a new address, so we weren't familiar with the buyer. I asked if he thought the guy might try and rob me, and he said no, but he also then asked if I was armed during the deliveries. I said, hell no, dude, I don't need to be, do I? At which point he shrugged and said, maybe. You should think about it. There was no way that I was risking gun charges just to deliver this dude's Pokemon cards, and the way he talked had me assuming that he was just exaggerating the risk to sound cool. It turns out, he was actually kind of right. The buyer asked to meet me in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, which was apparently just around the corner from his apartment. He didn't want to give his exact address, because he had a collection worth hundreds of thousands, so he'd only meet me in the 7-Eleven parking lot, he said. Now right away I'm thinking, I don't like this. The meet was a public space, well lit too, but that wouldn't matter to some crackhead who'd worked out that robbing card couriers could bag him a heck of a lot of money. And the amount of time that I was left waiting had me on edge too, because most buyers were super excited to get their cards or games or merch or whatever, and never left you hanging for long. But I was due to meet this guy at 4:30, and by 5:10, it was almost dark and he still hadn't showed. I got even more on edge when some shirtless homeless dude started practicing his kung fu over by a dumpster, because if he started practicing it on my car, then we were going to have problems. Not just for the obvious reasons either, but because it might mess up the delivery. I told myself just a few more minutes and then I was driving back to my nerd guy and chalking it up to a no-show. But then just as the streetlights flickered on, some dude in a hoodie and a baseball cap started walking over to my car, very sketchy-like. I'm looking at this dude thinking, you do not look like my usual customer. But after he slides into my passenger seat and I make sure his money's good, I gave him his card and it was like I'd handed him a holy relic. His eyes lit up as he looked at it through the plastic wrapper, and I was silently mad at myself for assuming this guy was some scumbag when his money was good and he was actually kind of cool. And just before he got out of my car, he pointed towards the homeless guy and says, "Is that dude with you?" But I just sort of scoffed and said no, but told him he was great entertainment while I waited. And then after thanking me for the delivery, the guy got out of my car and started walking back towards the 7-Eleven. I started my car, put her into drive, and then right when I did, the buyer yelled something at the homeless guy, did a few kung fu moves back at him, and then started walking away laughing to himself. He was making fun of him all right, but it wasn't malicious, more playful than anything else. But the homeless guy did not see it that way, and after giving the buyer a death stare for a few seconds, he starts rummaging in the dumpster like he's looking for something. I stopped to watch him from my driver's seat, kind of thinking, okay, why do I really not like the look of this? And then that gut feeling explained itself when the homeless dude pulls out a machete out of the dumpster and started running full speed at the buyer, who had absolutely no idea what was coming. I honked my horn 3 times real fast, trying to alert the buyer to what was coming for him. Then when he realized what was happening, he freaked out so hard that he fell right on his face trying to get a sprint going. I guess instinct kicked in for me because out of nowhere, I'm putting my foot down and just sending it towards this homeless dude. He sees the headlights, and then he's almost like a deer, freezes, and then the next thing, wham, and he just sort of disappears from view. Literally the first thought that comes into my head is, holy shit, I think I just killed a guy. And people are now coming out of the store and freaking out thinking I just murdered this dude out of nowhere. I opened up the door and got out to see the damage, and the shirtless homeless dude is just splayed on the concrete. There's a bunch of blood leaking out of a gash to his head. Some people are yelling for someone to call 911, while others are walking up to me saying, "What the hell did you just do?" and thinking I tried to run the buyer down too. Luckily, he jumps in right away and lets everyone know what happened and how this crazy shirtless dude had been hiding a goddamned machete in the dumpster, probably just waiting for someone to mess with him. The cops showed up quick, then the paramedics, and when they took the homeless dude away, he was still out of it. He was detained in the parking lot until the cops reviewed the security camera footage in the 7-Eleven, and then once they saw me and the buyer were telling the truth about what had happened, they said I was free to go. I ended up going into the 7-Eleven to buy a pack of smokes, which was me quitting smoking for like the 7th time, and as I bought the pack, the guy behind the counter said I was a hero. He said it was him who showed the cops the footage, and if it wasn't for me, the buyer would have been screwed. That shirtless homeless guy had been hanging around the store for months, and given his history of threatening interactions, both he and his coworkers agreed it was only a matter of time before he did something serious. That was kind of reassuring, but what wasn't reassuring was something one of the cops said to me before I was free to leave. He said I was probably going to get a call from a detective, in which case I should lawyer up before talking to anyone, especially if that guy dies. Well, lucky for me, the homeless dude didn't die. He had to have his head stitched up, and he spent a couple of days in the hospital before being released. But after that, he disappeared and there was no pressing charges. I still had to talk to the cops again just to get the story straight, but after that, they told me I was home free and that I wouldn't be hearing from them again. That was a huge relief because for a while, I was convinced that this sick twist of fate was going to occur where my attempt to save a person's life had destroyed my own. Thankfully, that didn't occur, and nothing that wild ever happened again on any other delivery. But even today, with a large homeless population around here, I still find myself getting super on edge whenever I see one crashing out. I know they're not all bad, and that life just beats some people down, but I think we can all agree that people with nothing left to lose can be very, very dangerous. A long time ago, back when I was still a broke high school dropout, I used to advertise handyman services on Craigslist. It was actually a pretty good moneymaker for a while, so much that it delayed me starting an actual business because I was making so much money. But over time, the places I was hitting up got weirder and weirder until eventually I had to quit working Craigslist jobs altogether. People sometimes ask if there was one specific job, one specific straw which broke the mule's back, and I always tell them about this one particular encounter. One day I get a call from a dude about putting up some shelves in his place. He's got the shelves, he's got a place he wants them, and he just doesn't have the tools or the skills to put them up. So he gives me a call, we arrange for a time for me to drive over, then I get there with my toolbox for what I figured would be a 30-minute job. But then the second I turned on the street and saw which house I was working in, I started getting one of those weird sinking feelings. That place was a total mess. There's trash on the lawn, there's a rusted car with no wheels propped up in the driveway, and the windows look like they hadn't been cleaned in years. Like I said, I had the bad luck of being called out to a bunch of different houses like that, and I was starting to get real goddamn sick of it too. I'm not talking about folks too sick or old to take care of themselves. I understand that not everyone has the time or energy to keep their places looking like something off of an HOA leaflet. But when a place is so dirty that there's actual fleas hopping around the furniture, you really wanted to ask a person, how the hell can you live like this, man? What's wrong with you? And this guy was that type. This guy, I'll just call him Jerry, said that he lived with his Aunt Janie, and that we had to be quiet because she was sleeping. I told him, "Dude, maybe this isn't the best time for me to be hammering walls if your aunt is asleep." But he assured me it was fine, and since the job would be a quick one, she wouldn't mind the interruption. And I'm saying something like, "Whatever you say, boss." And then I follow him inside and out to a back room, which is where he wanted the shelves put up. But then right there, on the couch next to where he wants me to put the shelves up, is a pile of blankets with a very human-looking shape underneath. The second I saw it, I whispered, "Dude, that's not your Aunt Janie, is it?" And then he nodded and said, "Yup." And I told him there's no way that I was hammering the wall right next to her without waking her up. And then right as he's giving me some explanation about how it's fine and she won't mind, something hits me. I start thinking, who the hell's sleeping totally covered up like that? And I'm making my way across the room towards the shelves when I suddenly realize Aunt Janie isn't asleep, is she? I turned to say something to Jerry. I can't quite remember what now, but I turned to see him sliding something heavy in front of the door. I asked what he's doing, and he tells me the hinge is loose and he needs the car battery in front of it to stop it swinging open. He tries staying all calm and convincing, but I can smell bullcrap immediately. The only reason he wanted to put that thing in the way was to keep me from being able to get out of there fast, or in other words, he wanted me trapped. To this day, how quickly and how strangely the situation escalated is something that's never been topped for me. In the space of maybe 30 seconds, I went from this poor lady's getting her nap interrupted to realizing she was most likely taking a permanent nap at the hands of the guy I'd just been swapping small talk with. One minute I was there to put up some shelves. The next, I wasn't sure if I was getting out of there alive because right after Jerry tells me that lie about the door not closing properly, he bends down and picks up this hefty-looking metal pipe. I ask him, "What's that for?" Trying to stay as cool as possible, and he responds, "Oh, this thing? Nothing. Just picking it up so you don't trip over it." But he's holding it tight in his hand like a weapon, so I knew he wasn't doing anything out of courtesy for me. I knew I had to think on my feet and find some excuse to get out of there that didn't provoke him into trying to hit me with that pipe. But I also knew that there was a real good chance that the guy was going to get violent with me, in which case I had to arm myself. I had a gun at home at the time for home defense, but I didn't go carrying it around with me, not always anyway. So at first I say, Well, let me see which tools I need for this. And the first thing I pull out of my bag is my claw hammer. I then take a look at the shelves while playing extremely dumb, and then I ask him something along the lines of, I think this is going to wake up your Aunt Janie and make her real mad, dude. I'm a heavy sleeper myself, but I gotta tell you that I'd be waking up with someone hammering on a wall right next to my head. And I couldn't believe what he did next. I saw him start relaxing again once I started playing dumb. It was obvious that whoever was under the blanket wasn't just sleeping, but since my best chance of avoiding conflict was playing along, that's what I did. I tell him about his aunt waking up and how it's not a good idea if she's sick or needs rest or whatever, and then this guy walks over to the couch saying, "Nah, it's all right," and then lifts up the blanket and starts yelling, "Aunt Janie, wake up!" She's got a washcloth or something covering her face, but just her face, like a death mask. It might sound kind of weird, but I think that was the creepiest thing about this entire exchange. Seeing this poor old lady with just her face covered after he'd pulled back the blanket. Remembering him pick up that metal pipe kind of just makes me mad to think about these days. But the image of that piece of cloth or whatever it was covering up her face like he'd sort of, I don't know, taken her face away from her, it creeps me out something awful. Anyway, I still got no chance but to keep playing along, so that's what I keep doing. I remember saying, "Damn, she is a heavy sleeper, huh?" And then he says, "I told you, man, she's sick. She's not going to wake up. It's cool." He had not mentioned anything about her being sick, and that was literally the first time. But still, I just play along with my hammer in my hand, and then I go back to looking through my toolbox and trying to think of another excuse. That was probably the most at risk I felt, because I'm watching Jerry out of the corner of my eye thinking, if he rushes me right now, I'm screwed, because I'm kneeling down with my back to him. I guess that kind of hurried my thought process along, because the next thing I remember saying, damn it, I think I brought the wrong brackets." He gave me a confused look as I stand up again and turn to him, so I knew that I was in the clear in terms of being able to bluff him, which was a huge relief. But I still wasn't out of the woods just yet. He says, "Huh? Brackets?" And so I start explaining I need this special little wooden bracket if I was going to drill into the plaster. It was total nonsense. I could have used whatever the hell kind of bracket I had with me, but Jerry didn't know that, so that's what I went with. I told him all I needed to do was head out to my trunk to get them, and even volunteered to leave my toolbox there because I wasn't going anywhere, and I'd be right back once I grabbed them from my trunk. It hurt knowing that I was about to lose them. That was a couple of $100 in tools at least, but I also knew that that was sort of my ace in the hole when it came to getting out that door, because it completely fooled Jerry into thinking that I was going to be right back. He steps out of the way of the door, moves the car battery so I can actually open it, and then I walk back out to the truck. I don't suspect a thing, and I'm gonna be right back. But then the second I get to my truck, I'm in the driver's seat and gunning the engine like my life depended on it. A few minutes later, I'm pulling into the parking lot of a strip mall and calling 911. I told the dispatcher everything, and she told me if there really was a dead body involved, I was probably going to get a call back from the cops sometime, and she was right. Just like I suspected, Aunt Janie was dead, and it meant I needed to be fingerprinted so the cops could distinguish mine from anyone else's. I figured right then that it must have been murder, and that Jerry was some psycho who murdered that lady before taking up residence in her home, but that's not actually what happened. Jerry had learning difficulties, pretty serious ones too, and it was actually his aunt lying there dead on the couch. I don't know what happened to his mom and dad, but his aunt had been taking care of him all of his life, and then when she died, he just kind of lost it, refused to accept it, and then only armed himself with that pipe because he thought I was going to separate him from his beloved Aunt Janie. I mean, that's exactly what I was going to do, so I suppose I really was in danger once I was in that room with his dead aunt. But after the cops told me about his situation and how I had grounds to press charges for wrongful detainment, I just declined. I felt bad for the guy. He didn't understand that his aunt was gone, or if he did, he sure as hell wasn't ready to let her go. Now don't get it twisted, if he'd have come at me with that pipe, I'd have taken his goddamn head off. But finding out that he wasn't some monster, just a confused, heartbroken hermit with the mind of a child, that totally changed how I looked at it. It made me realize how much danger I was putting myself in by visiting random homes like that. When I step inside, I become part of their world and part of their stories. And some people's stories don't have happy endings. Almost 25 years ago now, when I first moved to Abilene, I had a job prospect completely fall through on me. I had rent to pay, groceries and gas to buy, and since I only had a couple of $100 in savings to tide me over, I was very stressed about it. But as luck would have it, I'd somehow managed to find myself an awesome roommate to live with, and he turned out to be a huge help. Daryl was a big computer nerd at the time when not everyone was hooked up to the internet, so when I told him all about my money troubles, he said that he'd try his best to find me some respectable employment. I didn't think there was much that he could do. I mean, this was the early 2000s, so job websites were practically non-existent back then. But to my surprise, and within just a few short hours of his promise, Daryl delivered. When he told me he'd found something suitable, I was halfway to telling him I'm not standing outside a bank dressed as a dollar bill. But he just laughed and pointed at his computer screen before telling me to read through the post. Basically, a guy on Craigslist was offering $100 a day to anyone who'd help him clear out the garage of an old house he'd just purchased, and they didn't require anything but a can-do attitude and a willingness to work hard. At the time, it seemed like great money for a simple job, so I rushed to contact the guy before someone else did. It turns out the guy's name was Rick, and he made his money flipping old houses around Abilene. He seemed like an okay dude too, so once he was happy that I was the right guy for the job, we arranged a date and time for me to drive over to the house. I got there just before 8 a.m., then Rick and I had ourselves some coffee before he showed me the garage. It was only then that it made sense why he was offering $100 a day. To say the place was a mess would be the understatement of the century. The trash was literally floor to ceiling in the back corners, like these miniature mountains of old toys, furniture, and appliances that were covered in dust and cobwebs. The whole floor was covered in it too, and we had to haul out a ton of old crap just to be able to walk our way into the garage. Everything that was straight up trash went into a dumpster Rick had rented, whereas anything we figured that we might be able to renovate got lined up in the driveway. And then after a couple of hours, we managed to uncover some cabinets that lined one of the walls. Rick starts opening them up to see what's in there, and then he sort of rummages around for a minute before saying, "Well, what do we have here?" And he pulled out a wooden box, about half the size of a shoebox, and even though it was covered in dust and dirt, I could see how fancy it was. Rick sets it down and opened it up, and inside is what looked like some kind of antique six-shooter with similarly fancy engravings on it. Rick started saying how it might be silver-plated, but even if not, it still had to be worth a few $1,000s at auction, and by looking at it, I had to agree. That thing looked like it should have been in a museum or something, and I had no doubt in my mind that a collector would pay top dollar for it, maybe even more if its original owner had been someone famous or historical. I congratulated him on his find and then got back to work, hauling stuff out of the garage. Now we continued on working for the next couple of hours, then just after 1 p.m., Rick asked if I was hungry. I was so starved I could have eaten my own fist. When I agreed it was time for a lunch break, Rick gave me $50 and said if I drove to his favorite barbecue place, lunch was on him and I could keep the change. And let me tell you, barbecue always tastes better when it's free. There's a science to it. It has to be. And so I took his $50, bought a bunch of barbecue, and then drove back to the house with 2 bags full of brisket, links, pickles, and potato salad. I parked my car, then started walking up the driveway, and here's where you kind of need to know something about the setup. There was a crap ton of junk piled up against the garage door, and we weren't even halfway through clearing out all that crap yet, so I had to walk all the way around this big old garage to the back door to get inside. And so there I go, hauling these 2 big bags of barbecue, then when I got to the doorway, there's Rick with his back to me. I tell him, "Hey man, back with lunch." But he doesn't turn around, not right away. And I don't know exactly what it was about him, but I remember getting this bad feeling right there when he didn't respond to me. We'd been working all morning and well into the afternoon, too, and if he felt anything like I did, then the fact that he didn't turn around and jump at the bag of food was just weird. I gave it maybe 3 or 4 seconds and then called out to him again, saying, "Yo, Rick, I'm back. What's the holdup? Let's eat." And he kind of jerked his head to the side like he'd only just heard me, and then slowly started to turn around. But as he did, I noticed the open box on a dusty counter nearby, the one that held that 6-shooter. Only now, the box was empty, and the bullets were gone. Seconds later, I see the gun in his hand, but I see this little trickle of blood coming out of his nose too, and one of his eyes was very bloodshot. And I'm not talking like smoking reefer bloodshot either. I'm talking smashed in the face with a baseball bat kind of bloodshot, like so bloodshot it almost looked black. I figured he was going through some kind of medical emergency, and I was about to ask if he needed me to call 911. But then the next thing, he kind of halfway raises that 6-shooter to point it at me, but then stops himself. I can see him struggling, like he's fighting the urge or something, so without another thought, I just dropped the bags, turned, and ran like hell. I bolted it all the way out to my car, hearing 2 loud gunshots and then this almighty crash along the way. I remember thinking that he must have fell into a pile of junk to make that kind of crash. I was just about to book it too, because I didn't want to be there if Rick got up and came out shooting again. But then I realized that if I did just up and leave without warning anyone, it'd be on me if someone ended up getting shot. I had my own gun in my glove compartment, so I grabbed it, kept my eyes trained on the garage and the pathway leading from it, and then started whistling double loud till someone appeared asking what the hell was going on. I told them to call the cops and EMS because someone had gone crazy and they had a gun. They rushed back inside, and then not long after, I heard sirens getting louder before the cop car skidded around the corner. I put my gun away before they got out, and then once they did, I directed the 2 officers toward the garage where Rick still was. They appeared around the side, and then I hear them yelling things like, "Police, come out with your hands up." I didn't hear any shots, which gave me hope. Then one of the cops came out saying Rick needed an ambulance, and I was relieved to hear that he wasn't outright dead. But I was still very worried about him for obvious reasons. He looked in a bad way when I saw him, nose all bloody with his eyes all messed up, so he was obviously hurting in some way. But then the way he'd almost had to fight himself to keep from shooting me, that made me think something had gone wrong in his brain. And somehow, even though I almost just took a bullet from an antique pistol, the idea of poor old Rick losing his mind in some way was even scarier to me than the idea of getting shot. And once EMS had arrived and the cops had secured that gun, one of them came over to talk to me about what had happened. I told him everything, from start to finish, how Rick had been a perfectly nice dude right up until he hadn't, and how whatever happened to him seemed to happen right as I got back. I knew that because the blood coming out of his nose hadn't even started dripping off his chin yet. But aside from that, I didn't know a thing about what happened to Rick or why he started acting the way he did. I saw the EMS guys wheeling Rick to an ambulance. He didn't look conscious, and he had one of those oxygen mask things on. I kept asking EMTs if he was going to be okay, but they said they didn't know. After I got into my car and drove home, that was pretty much the last I heard of it for about a month. And then out of the blue, Rick gives me a call. He said he was sorry for frightening me and wanted to stop by my place to give me the $100 he owed me for the day's work, even though I only did half. I told him that wasn't necessary and that I was just glad to hear that he was okay, but he insisted on stopping over to thank me in person because if it wasn't for me, he might not be alive. I told him if that was the case, he was free to stop by whenever he liked, and when he did, he had more than just $100 for me. When he stopped by, Rick told me what the doctor said. He told them he started feeling funny right around the time he picked up the gun. He'd been bored waiting for me to come back with lunch and decided to get out that 6-shooter again. But that's where things started getting a little hazy. When he saw me in the doorway, he got scared because he didn't recognize who I was, and then once he did, He was already halfway to pointing the gun at me, and like I suspected, it was like he had to battle himself not to do it, like his brain and body were arguing back and forth with each other. Last thing he said he remembered was seeing me run off. After that, he didn't remember nothing till he woke up in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I sat there with my jaw on the floor, and even now, I can't really imagine how that must have felt for him, losing control of your own body, and that's scarier than anything from any horror movie, at least anything I've ever seen anyway. When he was done telling me about the medical side of things, Rick turned and reached into his jacket that he had slung over my kitchen chair. He then pulled out an envelope that contained way more than just $100. When I realized how much money was in there, easily over $2,000, he started telling me about putting that gun he found up for auction. He didn't tell me how much that thing actually sold for. He said some collector stepped in before he even hit the podium and offered almost double the buyout price just to secure it as theirs. And I remember laughing and saying, I knew it. I knew that thing looked expensive. And then as much as I wanted to turn down his offer of the money, Lord knows I needed it. Rick then said something about how if it wasn't for me, he might not be alive to put the gun up for auction in the first place, and he figured the least he could do was share some of his unexpected earnings with the man who saved his life. And I don't think I'd go that far personally. The doctors and nurses and paramedics saved Rick's life, whereas I was just about ready to shoot him if he appeared from that garage pointing that pistol, so I don't think I can claim too much credit. But I guess I did help get the ambulance there in a roundabout way by calling the cops, so I understood where he was coming from. After that, we went our separate ways, and he'd been a memory ever since. I still think about him from time to time, though, wondering how he's doing and if that medical thing ever flared up again. But I also think about how it was a hell of a time for it to kick in for the first time right when I was coming back with lunch and he was holding that gun. Because maybe on another day, the cops show up hours, maybe even days later, and we're both lying there dead as doornails, all because the wrong thing happened in the wrong place at the wrong time. In my senior year of high school, my dad said that if I got myself a job to pay for gas money, he'd give me the keys to his old Dodge. Then when a friend of mine said that she'd found babysitting jobs on Craigslist, I started looking there to see if I could find anything nearby. But while I was looking, I found a kind of sitting job that was somehow both very familiar and very different to babysitting. Dog sitting. And the first time I saw an ad, I sort of thought, no way, this is actually an option? I was excited to see an ad like that, not because it meant taking care of a dog, and I am very much a dog person, but because a lot of the babysitter wanted posts said applicants needed experience. I had zero experience babysitting, but my family had a dog, so I felt confident saying that I had the wherewithal to take care of a pooch while its owner was away. I called the person who posted the ad and ended up sitting for this boxer dog named Charlie for a few hours, and then the rest is history. I was hooked. These days, I run a dog grooming and walking service in upstate New York. I won't try to milk this for free advertising, I promise, and dogs are my whole entire universe right now. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing, and back during my dog-sitting days, I had a few close calls that had me rethinking my entire business strategy. When I told my dad I could find dog-sitting jobs online, he seemed super skeptical about it, and I guess he had to be right. This was back before absolutely everything was done online, so the idea of his teenage daughter heading over to some total stranger's house seemed crazy to him. But once I assured him I wouldn't travel too far, and wouldn't come home too late at night, and wouldn't sit for anyone I hadn't talked with extensively on the phone first, he relented. I didn't just say all that to placate him either, and it might sound harsh, but I didn't respond to ads posted from rougher parts of the city or the wider county. I had my brand new truck to worry about, and I had to drive home late from these places too, so I was very discerning when it came to the jobs I took. But I was even more the fool, I guess, because that's what had me responding to this one ad without any reservations at all. The address was a real nice part of town with big front lawns, 3-story homes, with things like fountains or statues in the driveway. That was another nice part about dog sitting too. Some of the houses you got to visit and make believe like it was yours. So the second I saw that address, I was down. First off, this ad was offering $80 for just 4 hours from 7 p.m. until 11 p.m., and with most other dog-sitting jobs paying about $30 to $40 for the same sort of hours, I should have seen that as the red flag that it was, I guess. But I also figured, hey, these rich people, of course, they're going to pay more than the average. So being greedy, I read on and instantly I understood why they were offering so much cash. They had a very boisterous, borderline hyperactive 2-year-old named Rufus, who was a Great Dane. And for those that don't know, and I guess the clue is kind of in the name, but Great Danes are, well, great. They're big dogs, I mean really big dogs, the kind of dogs you see at a distance and think, what am I even looking at here? Is that a small horse or am I tripping? And at the dog groomers, young Great Danes are the only dog we still find genuinely intimidating because they can be very, very boisterous, and they do not know their own strength very well either. And even back then, I knew that they'd be a lot to handle. But with my heart set on playing some make-believe in that big old house and maybe getting to make friends with a dog that outweighs me by about 50 pounds, I thought to myself, why not? And gave them a call. And the lady I spoke to was super nice, and we talked all about Rufus and what a handful he could be. She said that, in her opinion, the best course of action would be for her to lock Rufus in the home's kitchen with a bunch of food and water. I'm 5 nothing, and I've been that tall since I was 17, so even back then I've been in serious trouble if old Rufus took a disliking to me. So after being secured in the kitchen, it was my job to just sit in the TV room and listen to make sure Rufus wasn't freaking out too hard that his mommy and daddy were away. I asked if I could meet him first, at least from the other side of the toddler gate that they installed in the kitchen. Rufus would be able to smell me in the other room, and unless he knew I was cool, he would almost certainly freak out if he thought a stranger was in the house. The lady said that was fine. She just didn't want him up close just in case he knocked me down and I wanted to sue. I laughed and said I'd never do that, and she laughed too, but still said, you never know. And once we were done, I thanked the lady for the opportunity and said that I couldn't wait to meet her in person. She thanked me in return and then said that she'd see me in a couple of days, and I was genuinely excited. It was a special job with a special dog and a really special house too. But if I'd have had any inkling of what I almost walked into, there's no way I'd have showed up that night. I drove over in my dad's old Dodge, and the house was just as incredible as I expected it to be. The lady was just as nice too, and while her husband was getting ready upstairs for their date night, she walked me into the kitchen to go over some ground rules. I didn't want to be rude and interrupt, but literally the second she walked into the kitchen, I was thinking, where's Rufus? The lady went over all the house rules, which was pretty much all the standard stuff. No boys, no trying to fill the hot tub, and no ordering pay-per-views on the TV. But then when she was done, I asked, so, where's Rufus? And without missing a beat, she says, Rufus is in the basement. To which I respond, okay, well, can I meet him? But her face kind of just drops a little before saying back, that won't be happening, I'm afraid. Sorry. There was a pause before I respond, that wasn't part of the agreement. I'd much prefer if you could introduce us a little so he doesn't mind me being here while all of you head out. And that's when the lady says, me and my husband talked about that, and we decided it wasn't a very good idea. I'd done enough dog-sitting jobs at that point to know that actually the reverse isn't a good idea, and if they really wanted me to be safe and Rufus to be chill, she should introduce me so he got an idea of my scent and that I was a friend. I made my point firmly but politely, enough to think that the woman might have actually changed her mind, but when I was done, she looked at me with this total stone-cold look in her eyes and told me, no. I didn't even really know what to say at that point. I'd never had anyone just sort of turn on me like that before. Sure, it was just a minor change to our arrangement, but what bothered me so much more was the way this woman's attitude just seemed to totally switch. She'd been the nicest lady ever up until then, and then when I insisted on meeting Rufus, she started acting like I was asking to poop in their washing machine. This super firm no, like I was completely in the wrong for even asking. The only thing I could think to ask was, why do you guys keep Rufus in the basement? Are you sure he's going to be okay down there? She didn't lose her temper with me, not entirely, but she did march over to the basement door to gesture to it like there was nothing wrong. And she says, "There's the basement. Rufus is downstairs. All you have to do is keep your ears peeled for any signs of distress and call us if there are any. What's so hard to understand?" I remember looking at the basement door and feeling super uneasy that all I could hear was silence. 90% of the time when a dog is locked away like that and they know a stranger is in the house, they start barking and scratching. And even if they're a super well-behaved dog, they might not bark, but they're sure as hell coming to the door to take a sniff of whoever's on the other side. So the fact that there was total silence coming from the other side had me questioning if there was even a dog down there to begin with. I think by then my suspicion meter was dipping into the red zone. Alarm bells were blaring in my head, and it was like a whole Chinese Olympic opening ceremony of red flags waving in front of me. I knew I wanted to leave right then and there. If they were willing to switch up the agreement at the last minute, there was also a chance they'd choose not to pay me the agreed amount of money, too. And so my foot is already halfway out the door, and I'm thinking if I do end up sitting for this family, it's probably going to be a one-time only thing. And then without even me really thinking about it, I just blurted out, "Is there even a dog down there?" I wasn't even fully invested in the idea that there wasn't a dog down there. In fact, it was more like I was concerned about some kind of animal cruelty situation. I pictured some old hound lying on a doggy bed down there, tired and neglected, and maybe that's why they didn't want me to see him. So when I accused her of lying to me, it was actually more of a bluff call than anything else. I figured the lady would get super offended, that my question might just be the last straw and that she'd end up either showing me Rufus or asking me to leave. She did neither. Instead, her tone turned super sweet again and said something like, "Of course there's a dog down there, sweetie. Here, listen." Then she bangs her fist on the basement door and yells, "Rufus, you alright down there?" And then I heard, "Oof, oof, oof," coming from the basement. But instead of reassuring and relieving me, I felt this icy cold feeling run down my spine. Because if there's one thing I am 100% sure of from that encounter, it's that whatever made that woof sound was not a dog. It was human. I knew it was a person making that sound. The lady knew it was a person, and she knew that I knew it was a person down there too. I could tell just from the look on her face, the way she went from all sweet to kind of nervous. I don't know if those pretend barks worked on other people, but they sure as hell didn't work on me. Because after a few seconds of awkward eye contact, I turned around, walked out of that house, and made a beeline for my car. I guess the lady figured that she could maybe shame me into coming back because she started yelling all this mean stuff as I sped away walking to my car. And then the last thing I heard before I zoomed off down the street was her offering to double the money that I was being paid. But honestly, she could have tripled it, quadrupled it even, and I'd still have wanted out of there faster than you can say, "That ain't no dog." When I got home, Dad obviously wanted to know why I was home early, and then when I told him, he just about exploded and ran to the cops. His complaint boiled down to, "These slippery sons of bitches tried to trick my little girl into being alone in a house with some weirdo down in the basement." And so the cops drove over to that big old house in that nice part of town to figure out what the hell was going on. They called back the next day, saying they'd inspected the basement and that nothing was going on. There was no dog bed down there, no people either, just a regular old basement full of junk and old boxes. They did, however, make it clear that if I hadn't felt safe there, I'd done the right thing in walking away. Dad told me that stuff like that is why he'd been so nervous about the idea of me staying in people's houses. He said most folks are good, kind-hearted people who want quiet, peaceful lives, but it only takes one single, solitary individual to ruin a good thing and spoil it for everybody else. He also said there's sometimes a difference between what people present themselves as and who they really are, and that's exactly how they lure girls like me into their homes on the pretext of something innocent. I don't know exactly what that family's deal was, if that person was down there of their own free will, or if something much, much darker was going on. All I know is that it made me much more careful when it came to the kind of jobs I took, before eventually making me give it up altogether. Most homes are filled with good people, but find that 1 in 1,000 or 1,000,000 or whatever it might be, and you don't get out alive, if you even get out at all.
It's late at night. You've had a long day at work. You're exhausted. You finally turn out all the lights and go to bed. But, of course, you get a notification on your phone. You have to check it, right? You're not sleeping yet, so you take a quick look. And that's when you see that it's about that story that you've been following all week. The international manhunt that's basically the next smash hit true crime docuseries in the making in real time. And updates are coming in rapid fire. You sit bolt upright, take a deep breath, and begin scrolling. For the next 2 hours, you devour every delicious detail about the grisly crime, the search for a fugitive, and the mindless commentary that goes along with it. Our collective obsession with true crime stories has, of course, exploded in the last several years, and movies, books, podcasts, social media, daily news stories, they all feed this obsession constantly. It's pretty easy to think that this is a relatively new thing, but of course, it's not. And while it may be difficult to pinpoint a single moment in history when this cultural phenomenon began, there is one story which may be the very reason why you're up late at night doom scrolling. One story about a brutal murder, the heart-pounding pursuit of the killer, and a revolutionary new technology which sparked a cultural obsession that we still can't get enough of. History always has a twist, a single unexpected and often forgotten moment that changes everything that comes after it. In this series, each week, you'll hear a riveting story about a twist that you probably never heard of. But it's these stories that have shaped the very world we now live in. On today's episode, how murder went viral. This is a twist of history. It's July 9th, 1910 in London, England. A 16-year-old boy flies down 4 flights of stairs of a concrete office building and steps out onto Borough High Street on the south bank of the River Thames. The noise hits him immediately. People rushing down the sidewalk, the road filled with a mix of horse-drawn buggies and rattling automobiles. The street is so crowded it overwhelms the boy. He quickly pulls his hat down further to partially cover his face and starts weaving his way through the foot traffic. He darts his eyes back and forth, convinced that someone is going to recognize him. He can feel his heartbeat all the way up in his ears. He keeps rushing and scanning the street, but nobody pays any attention to him, so the boy finally relaxes a little. He slows down to a normal walk and makes his way to the entrance of a nearby London Underground station. A few minutes later, the boy sees his father coming towards him, holding a single small suitcase. The boy greets his father, and they run down the steps together in the Underground, just in time to catch the next train. The boy watches the train doors close and the mass of passengers exiting. He looks around to make sure that he still hasn't been recognized by anyone and follows his father on board. As the train car continues to fill up, the boy and his dad lower their heads, avoiding eye contact with their fellow passengers. And finally, the train starts to roll down the underground tracks, and the boy and his father exhale. Their escape from England has begun. To hear the rest of this story, go follow A Twist of History now. Episodes 1 and 2 are live right now wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to leave a rating. Thank you so much.
This incident happened to me on St. Patrick's Day of 2020. To give a bit of context for later on in the story, I'm relatively short, only 5'2", not that strong, and of Mexican descent. Back in my freshman year of high school, I met a guy who, we'll call him Brick, was really sweet and always had a gentle heart for me and my group of friends. He was tall, about 6'2", was fair-skinned, and had thick curly blonde hair. The dude was the best person I could have had as a friend. Our group of friends all knew he had an almost obsessive crush on me, given the fact that he wouldn't let me out of his sight and would lavish me in gifts every chance he got. He only stopped when I started dating my current boyfriend in the beginning of 10th grade, Sonny. Brick backed off, but he still would flirt with me and give me extremely long and uncomfortable hugs, but I was blind to all of this. That and he backed off because my boyfriend is on the chubby side and knew how to handle guns since he was a kid. Everything was fine until Brick opened up to me about his home life. Apparently his parents were verbally and mentally abusive to him. He wanted to sneak out of his house and find a place on his own when he turned 18. Of course, me and my friends were shocked and helped him out the best that we can to move out. We found him a place to stay and offered up money and food to help him, but he declined. As soon as his 18th birthday came, he said that he would leave that day, but later on we all found out that he never left. He told me it was because he'd only stayed for financial purposes and he would just take the abuse, I guess. This was the first sign of something changing him into another person unlike himself. He slowly started to become more angry, depressive, and reclusive to our friend group. Rightfully, we all wanted to check up on him, but the only person he wanted to talk to was me. He ranted to me about how much of a terrible world this was, how the abuse was affecting his brain, and how he was thinking of ending his own life. I not only sent him numerous phone numbers on abuse hotlines and adult protective services, but the next day I took him to a counselor at a high school to talk about the situation. After the meeting, Brick convinced me that he was going to change for the better, but now halfway into 2020, our senior year, he only got more aggressive and depressed. I even told him that he was a legal adult that can get away from all of his pain and was even offering him to move in with me and my family, but he also declined and wanted to stay with his abusive parents. Quarantine finally broke his mental state, and the night of St. Patrick's Day he snapped. He was messaging me about his life and how cruel it was and horrible, how he wanted to end his own life because he couldn't stand being away from me. Now personally, I've dealt with these kind of thoughts and actions in the past and have recovered from it, and he knew I turned a new leaf from it. But in a frenzy of text he typed, "Why don't we just end our lives together? We could go out and have the time of our lives and go into the woods and just end it all." It made me break down, and I called Sonny about what Brick was saying to me, and he was furious and hung up to now message him. Brick kept messaging me, "You're worthless, but I am too. It's not a big deal, no one loves us. We could die in each other's arms. Sonny doesn't love you, and he wants you dead too." Of course, I asked Sonny this, and he said Brick was just manipulating me into doing it with him. I finally messaged, "I won't do it. I went through these thoughts and it was torture. I'm not going to be dragged down with you." At the time, Sonny was messaging him in a furious message just saying, "What right do you have to say this to my girl?" Then Sonny sent me screenshots of what Brick really thought of doing to me, and seeing these words made me fear for my life. Brick's message simply said, "You know, I could just kill her, right? I know where she lives. She's so small and helpless. A small dark girl like her doesn't deserve to be in a white man's palace. All that hugging we did, I could just break her like a twig. I could take her out into the forest, chop her up, and nobody would miss her." After this, we both contacted the police and they went to his house. My boyfriend's last message to him was, "If you come anywhere near her, our families, or myself, I'll shoot you dead on the spot." Before this incident, I had never seen my boyfriend so furious and surprisingly scary like that, but it was for a good reason. We alerted our friend group not to message him, for he seriously needs help, and nobody had heard from him since April. In fact, his last message to us wasn't even a sorry. It was him explaining how he was happy to spend time with his family and how he looked forward to seeing me in college. We were both enrolling in the same community college. It makes me livid to know that he or his family didn't even say sorry, but I'm just so thankful that he's out of my life. To the viewers who are listening to this, please, Whoever's being verbally, mentally, or physically abused, just get them help. Be aware of what happens behind closed doors. And Brick, if you ever see this, be glad I didn't use your real name. You become this sick monster that is a shell of my now closest ex-friend. I never want to see you again, and if you contact me, Sonny, or our family ever in person, expect danger to be brought to your face and a warning shot. Stay away. When I was 11, my family lived in Alaska, about 14 miles north of Anchorage. As soon as you leave the actual city of Anchorage, you're in the wilderness pretty quickly. This event happened to me in the summer of 1977. I remember because the original Star Wars had just come out a few weeks before, and I was obsessed with it at the time. In 1977, the town I lived in was actually just a series of roads and off-roads. Most of the people there commuted to Anchorage for work. That's what my parents did. They both work nights, meaning I spend most of my time alone at home. I don't have any siblings. Our house was about a half-mile in from the nearest paved road and surrounded by woods. I didn't have any real friends that lived close by. I knew a kid who lived at the end of my road. His was actually the next closest house and was still about 300 yards from mine. One afternoon that summer, I was watching TV when there was a knock at our side door. I looked outside and saw it was the kid from the end of the street with someone else. I opened the door and he told me this kid was his cousin whose family had flown up from wherever they were from to visit. I can't remember the kid's name. I do remember immediately being nervous around this guy. He had blonde hair down to his shoulders, wore a t-shirt under a thin leather vest. He also had one of those wallets on a chain. This kid's eyes were incredibly dark. I was 11 and hadn't ever seen evil before, but this kid set off something in my brain. The boy from down the street even seemed nervous around him. He said he had told his cousin about my BB gun and how cool it was. I had recently been given a BB gun as a gift. I told them to wait outside and I would get it. I just knew I didn't want that kid in my house. I got the BB gun and went outside and handed it to the weird kid. He rolled it over in his hands and looked it up and down without his expression ever changing. Without handing it back to me, he asked me, "How much do you want for it?" I can't remember my reaction after all these years, but I didn't really need money and the gun was a gift, so I told him it wasn't for sale, and I remember apologizing for some reason. Unfazed, the kid hands the gun back to me, then reaches behind his back and pulls out the biggest knife I'd ever seen. I remember thinking for a second that it was a sword. If you've ever seen the movie Crocodile Dundee where he tells some robbers, "That's not a knife. This is a knife." And pulls out a huge knife, well, that's the knife this kid had. The kid said, "Well, how about a trade then?" I shot the BB gun at cans. What was I gonna do with this thing? Hunt a grizzly bear? I declined the offer nervously, and the kid turned away and started walking in the direction of their house. I went back inside and watched some more TV. About an hour later, there's another knock on the door. I go to our side window where I can see the door. I peek out and sure enough, it's that kid again. This time he was alone. The second time he knocked, it was louder. He called my name. I stayed quiet. He left the door and started walking around our house. My mother had a sunroom where she grew plants. It had large windows all along the wall. I saw him go to those windows, press his face against the glass and cup his eyes, trying to see deep into the house. I stayed out of sight. Luckily, there were no lights on and I had turned the TV off when I heard the knock. When he couldn't see anything, he continued around the house. He took out that huge knife and began tapping the butt of the handle along the outer wall as he circled. Then he started saying, "I know you're in there." I almost soiled myself. Of course he knew I was in the house. I was 11, home alone. How could I have left the house? Hop in a car and take off? Both our cars were gone anyway. I continued keeping low and quiet, hoping he might think I went to a friend's house somewhere else. How long could this psycho just circle the house? He was maybe 14. He'd get bored pretty quickly. No such luck. This kept up for about an hour. the tapping in his voice telling me to come out and that he had another trade for my gun. Screw that. I had gone all in on the I'm not home tactic, so I stayed quiet and made my way to the kitchen where our one telephone was. This was 1977. No cell phones, and our phone was attached to the wall in the kitchen. Luckily, it had a super long headset cord. I got it, stayed low to the floor, and called my mother at work. She took me seriously, but there was no way she could get home. My dad was in the Air Force, and they sure wouldn't let him skip out early to handle his son's crisis. I'd have to ride it out. The sun had gone down, and by that I mean it was barely peeking above the horizon. In the summer, the sun never went completely down in our area. The kid kept pacing around for another 30 minutes or so and then was suddenly gone. Not being an idiot in a horror movie, I just stayed down and quiet. Eventually my parents got home. I was still awake. They brushed it off as if to say, "See? Nothing to worry about." I never hung out with the kid down the street again, and I pretty much stayed inside the remainder of that summer. There was something wrong with that kid. Maybe it was in my head, or maybe he would have done something absolutely brutal to me, just for that BB gun. Due to lockdown measures, our city has introduced a curfew. This implies you can only leave your house at night for essential trips such as going to the hospital, coming and going to work, and coming from and going on vacation also falls under this category. The last one was the reason I was outside after curfew. I had a vacation planned for months to Spain and had to take the 3 a.m. night bus to the airport. I do travel a lot. I travel with a friend, with my parents, or alone. This time I was traveling alone. The place where I had to take the bus was a 20-minute walk away from my apartment. The walk was very uneventful, and as expected, I didn't see anyone wandering the streets. I did expect to see some police patrolling the streets to catch and fine and send home people who were outside without any reason, but none of them were anywhere to be seen. After reaching the bus stop, I still had to wait another 15 minutes for the bus to arrive. I was listening to some music and just looking around to see how empty the streets of the normally very busy city were. Suddenly I saw two men walking in the distance. They flagged down a taxi which was driving by and had a brief conversation with the driver, only for them to curse at him, slam the door of the car and walk away. I thought, please don't come this way. I'm not in the mood for that in the moment. And you guessed it, that's exactly what they did. I'm going to describe these men for you guys to better understand the rest of the story and my convenience telling it. One of the men was about 5'9" and stocky build. He was also wearing a facial mask. The other was a bit taller at about 6'2" and rather muscular. I was hoping for them to just pass by the bus stop and go wherever they needed to be, but unfortunately they came straight at me. The masked man broke the ice with, "Hey dude, do you have €1 for us? We need to get to..." He proceeded to name a city which was about an hour drive away from where we were. "We don't have enough money for a taxi." I told him I did in fact not have any change for him, which was true because due to the convenience and safety I only paid with cards, and he didn't seem to believe me. He continued the conversation with saying, "Come on, we only need like €10 for the taxi." I told him again I didn't have anything for him, and if I did have €1, I definitely wouldn't have €10 for them. This seemed to anger him and the muscular guy which was just standing to my side staring me down the whole time. Once again, I told them sorry and hoped that they would just leave. But suddenly the masked man signed the muscular dude and he proceeded to grab me by the collar and then he spoke up. "Listen, we can use force if we need to. It doesn't have to go this way if you just give us everything you got." Then the masked man added, "Yeah. He can bash your skull through the glass of this bus stop if he needs to. Just empty your pockets, kid." At that moment, I realized that I was getting robbed. But I'm not someone to just give up my belongings to some thugs. I asked the guy holding me to please take his hands off me and again told him I had no cash on me. I saw them look me over and looking at my headphones which I was wearing. Very expensive ones, I might add. They did cost me about €500. They insisted on me giving them all the money and belongings, and we're not having any of my "I don't carry cash, please." The buff dude said, "Well, if you don't have any cash, why don't you just show us your wallet? I knew if I would take it out, they would see my bank and credit card, which can do some contactless payments with, and I knew for sure that they would be satisfied doing exactly that. My suspicions were immediately confirmed when one of them asked by what bank I was with and what kind of cards I got. I just told them the name of my bank and kept silent. All this time they were still holding me, and I was frantically looking around, hoping someone, or at least some form of law enforcement, would show up. They did notice me looking around and started laughing in my face, and the masked man said, "You looking for the cops, aren't you? Trust me, they won't show up here. We can do whatever we want." After that, they let go of me and said, "Well, forget about everything that just happened. We're just going to make a deal. I'm going to sell you something right here and now." Then the buff dude lifted up his shirt only for him to take out a tablet from his belt. They showed me the tablet like an employee of an electronics store would, and I politely declined their offer. And once again, I reminded them that I didn't have any cash to pay them with, even if I wanted to. Then they started to talk about my headphones and phone. They said, "So those headphones, are they good quality, right?" I lied to them and said, laughing, "No, these are bootleg ones. The real deal's too expensive for me." But they told me I couldn't fool them. They knew that I was a rich, spoiled brat which got everything I wanted from rich, filthy parents, and they told me to take them off and also hand over my phone and wallet with. I told them that I was not just handing over my stuff, and if they so badly wanted to rob me that they indeed had to use force on me. They once again grabbed me by the collar and started to shake me just like a bully would do in cartoons. I knew this was a losing situation for me. I myself am a 21-year-old skinny guy, and because I was going to the airport, I had no kind of weapon on me to protect myself. I normally carry a huge hunting knife on me when I go outside at night for exactly this reason. I had to pull my knife once before, but that's a story for another day. So unarmed and not in any shape to fight, how am I going to win against a tall buff dude and his stocky accomplice? Either did they end up beating me up and taking everything they wanted, or a miracle had to happen. And lucky for me, the last one did happen. Suddenly the bus, which I was waiting for, started to approach. When the guys noticed it, they let go of me, and together said some expletives. Since we weren't the only ones on that street anymore, they got spooked of having at least one eyewitness in front of the bus driver. They told me, "You got lucky this time," and proceeded to give me a friendly pat on the back and started to walk off. When I got on the bus, I was shaking like a leaf, and the bus driver noticed and asked me, "So those two guys, they aren't your friends, right? They were bothering you, weren't they?" I told him that they were trying to rob me, but they had failed due to him showing up on time, and thanked him at least a dozen times for doing so. I didn't call the police after this to report this incident because, knowing how law enforcement works over here, they would just send over a unit to patrol the area where things went down for a couple of minutes, and that's that. Even if those guys were still hanging around and they did manage to catch them, they would have no evidence against them besides me telling them that they were about to rob me, and because of that, they would still get off scot-free. This situation could have been a lot worse if they were armed themselves or they had more time to start beating me up, but nonetheless, I was shaken up from it for a long while. So if the bus did in fact show up any later, I would have lost everything I had on me. I was so thankful that it did, and seeing how those guys were acting, I'm pretty sure that this wasn't their first rodeo, nor their last. Stay safe, everyone, and don't go outside at night if you don't have to. This probably started when I was about 6 to 8 years old. I come from a broken family. A mother that had to work so much she was barely home, and my brother had to take care of my sister and I. When we were younger, we were in and out of shelters because of our abusive father. He made our lives torture. My sister and I were left home alone with our father, who was abusive and neglectful towards us almost constantly. I was the main focus of his abuse. I was his first daughter, but he wanted a son, so he always treated me like a boy. My mother had to protect me the most from him because he was angry that he didn't get a son as his first child. For years, whenever he would take me to my grandmother, he had me stay in the same bed as him. He seemed to focus on me not just with anger. Eventually, the older I got, the more time I spent alone with him, the more that he would touch me. Eventually, this led to more explicit abuse. At the time, I didn't understand what it was, so I didn't know it was bad, and because I never really saw my mom, I didn't tell her what happened. Don't worry, he spent a long time in jail for this. The older I got, he started telling me never to tell anyone. I didn't want to lie to my mother because she had started asking questions about what we did when we were alone together. Once it was found out what happened, we went to court and he was in jail for 4 years. Once he got out, we got a restraining order against him, but that didn't stop him. He started stalking my sister and I. I was in middle school when this began. He kept trying to dismiss me from school, talk to me when I would walk home. Eventually, my mom had to get someone to walk my sister and I home since we walked together, but that still didn't stop him. He got my cousin to try and talk to me to bring me to see him, but I never went with her for fear of seeing my father. Once my father got fed up enough with trying to have contact with us, he tried to kidnap me multiple times. Mainly, it was with friends that I didn't know who they were or what they did. I had to go to therapy for years. I couldn't leave the house without feeling like I was going to be kidnapped and taken away forever and never see my family again. While I was a freshman in high school, my mother had answered the front door as there was a knock. I listened in because I didn't want it to be my father, and he had harmed her, but it wasn't my father. It was one of his friends who made a death threat to my entire family if he wasn't allowed to see me. We had to go to court for it, but it took a year and a half to get approved for him to see me. Around that time, it was confirmed that he had passed away. I was never told how he died, but I was only told that he was dead. Even though he's been gone for almost 4 years, I still have to go to therapy. I can't sleep, I rarely eat, and I have horrible nightmares about my childhood, and I've been diagnosed with clinical depression. Nobody from his side of the family or friends have tried contacting my family, but luckily I don't have to deal with him or anyone ever again, and I'll be forever thankful that that part of my life is over. I'm a 29-year-old female, and this happened to me 11 years ago when I was 18 years old. I live in New Mexico and had just left for my first year of college. I had chosen to go to Highlands University, which is in Las Vegas, New Mexico. It all started when I met this guy in my art class. Back then I used to smoke, and this guy had asked me if I wanted to come to his dorm after class and smoke. I'll call him A. Stupidly, I said yes, so we get to A's dorm, start to talk, and are hanging out and smoking. There was 2 other guys in A's room. One of them I had somewhat known because he lived in my dorm building, and I had seen him around. I'll call him B. The other guy in the room I had never met or seen before. I'll call him F. So we're all just hanging out when A decides that we should all go on a drive to see the castle in the mountains. The mountains were only a 10-minute drive from the university. There's also a hot springs a lot of the college kids go to, and past there's also a castle which is actually an international boarding school now. So we all get in F's car and decide to go check it out. So we're driving, and a voice inside me tells not to go up to the mountain. I thought I was being paranoid and decided to ignore it. We're passing through the castle when A says that we should take a drive into the mountains. Again, I got that horrible feeling not to go up and to turn around, but like an idiot, I once again ignore it. I've never been in these mountains and had no idea where we were going. We start up the mountain and the guys start to drink some Crown Royale. I've never really liked drinking, so I just have one shot. So we're driving pretty far into where we stopped seeing houses and we're just surrounded by forests. It was late October, and as we started reaching higher elevation, it started to snow. We pulled over and danced around in the snow, just having a good time. During this time, F had come up to me and told me if anyone was bothering me, he would mess them up. I got a really weird feeling from him and told him I didn't know what he was talking about. I told him that everything was fine and we're all just having fun. We decided to get back in the car and continue the drive further into the mountains. Finally, we were no longer able to keep driving because there was a pole blocking the path. F gets out of the car and goes up to the pole. On the pole there was a metal sign. F proceeds to punch and pull the sign with such rage that I instantly got this horrible feeling about him. He gets back in the car and we start on our way back down. I had no idea F, who was the driver, had been drinking or how much. This guy was all over the road, and being that we were on a dirt road, it was lightly snowing, the road was pretty muddy, and we were drifting all over the place. I was so freaked out that when we made another stop, F had gotten out of the car, and I told A to go and get the keys from F and drive us the rest of the way down the mountains. I'm sitting in the car with B, watching as A goes to talk with F. I start to get out of the car and walk towards them when, out of nowhere, F pulls out a black baton, like the ones police use, and hits A hard across the face. A does nothing, just starts to cry. My stomach instantly drops and I realize what a horrible situation I'm in. There's no one around. We're in the middle of the woods and this guy just went from 0 to 60 and turned into a complete psycho. On top of that, A isn't defending himself and B was a tiny guy, even smaller than me, so I just knew that they weren't going to stand up to him. As this all goes through my head, I start to hyperventilate and panic. I didn't know what to do, so I just started saying, "No, no, no," as I walk away from the car. F comes charging at me and raises the baton at me to hit me. I put my hands up and try to calm him down and tell him, "Okay, I'll get back in the car, let's just get in and go." This seems to work, and we get back in and start driving. There's still nobody and nothing around, and F is just hauling it all over the road. I thought I really was about to die then and there. I had no idea what F was going to do to us. I've always had strong men in my life, and I couldn't believe A and B were acting like defenseless little girls. Like me. This whole time driving, F is screaming at the top of his lungs at us in the car and taking his rage out mostly on me. I'm sitting in the back with B, so F is turned around yelling at me, not even looking at the road. It's honestly a miracle we didn't crash. I'm trying to talk him down, but it's not working. This dude has literally turned into Jekyll and Hyde. I tried using my cell phone to call the cops, but we were so far in that I had no service. Great. So many thoughts were racing through my head. I started talking to God silently because I really thought that I was about to die. I started praying, asking God to help my mom find my body up here in the mountains and help her find F, the person who will be responsible for my death. I start to think the next time he stops the car, I'll just make a run for it, even if there's nothing around. It was snowing and cold, but I would rather freeze than stay in this car. I'll run into the woods and hide there till F gives up looking for me, then make my way down the road till I hopefully run into something or someone. My heart was pounding so hard the whole time. As we were driving, there was a man on the side of the road taking pictures of the forest. I pressed my face up against the window so that maybe he would see me and the terror on my face and know something was wrong and get help. We were driving so fast, and fortunately he never got the chance to even see me. All of a sudden, F slams on the brakes and starts to get out of the car saying he was going to beat up B, and came to the door where B was sitting beside me. I had no idea what he was about to do, and I was terrified. As I'm watching, I see far up the road there was a house and a car was pulling out and started driving the opposite way of us. Again, the voice inside me tells me to get out of the car and start running. I was so scared I grabbed my purse, opened the door, and made a run for it. Have you ever had a dream where you can barely run even though you really want to? Or a scary movie where the girl is barely running from the killer and you're yelling for her to run faster? Well, that was me. I don't know if it was because of all the adrenaline or I was scared what F would do to me if he caught me, but I wasn't really running, more of dragging my body and forcing myself to move. It was truly like a horror movie. I'm screaming and waving my hands trying to get the car's attention. The car doesn't seem to see me and keeps driving. I make it to the house where the car came from and burst onto the property. There was about 5 dogs guarding the house barking at me viciously, but I didn't care. I ran onto the porch and started banging on the door. Luckily, as I looked around, all the dogs were tied up. I keep banging, but no one was answering. There was nobody home. As I'm freaking out, thinking what I should do next, F comes driving up in front of the house and stops the car. My heart sinks. I start pacing and panicking. A opens the door, still crying, and starts to get out of the car, telling me to get back in. In my head, I'm thinking, no way, you're insane. I'm not getting back in. You'll have to drag me from this porch. I yell at him no and start freaking out, knowing that they will have to force me to get back in, and who knows what F will do to me. As A has his leg out of the door about to come get me, the car that had driven down the road had turned around and pulled up to the house. At the sight of the car, F takes off. A falls out of the car, crashes to the ground as is nearly ran over by the psycho. A flood of relief washes over me as the owner of the house gets out of his car and asks what's going on. A and I try our best to explain and ask the man if he would drive us back to campus. We get in his car, and as we're driving back, I just lose it. From all the adrenaline and trying to keep my composure the entire time of this ordeal, I just broke down. I just started to cry so hard I couldn't breathe and started hyperventilating really bad. We tried telling the man driving us what had happened, but having two hysterical teens trying to explain through tears didn't really help. All the man said was we smelled like alcohol and he needs gas money for taking us. To be honest, he was kind of a jerk, but I was just thankful to have a ride and be alive. On our way, B was waiting on the side of the road, so we stopped and picked him up too. He told us when he got the chance F wasn't looking, so he decided to jump out of the car when F had slowed the car down enough for him to jump out. Finally, shaken up and still crying, we had made it back to campus. I went to the police the next day, but they said they couldn't do anything. So, thanks for nothing. I never talked to A or B after that. I saw F once on campus after that, but just avoided him completely. It took me a few years to get over this incident, and in some ways I never have. If I would see someone that looked like F, the anxiety would overtake me, and my body would start shaking. Moral of the story, whenever the voice inside of you is trying to tell you there's danger and screaming not to do something, always listen to that voice. Don't ignore it like I did. And ladies, don't put yourself in a stupid situation. I'm the only girl in my family with two huge older brothers who would kill for me. To be alone with three guys, one who was a psycho and two others who wouldn't defend themselves or me, was absolutely terrifying. I never want to feel that helpless again. Don't be stupid like me. I'm now married to a really hardcore husband who would never let anything happen to me. He bought me a gun, which I take everywhere. I put myself in a really bad situation then that could have ended a lot worse, and I'm so thankful that it didn't. I believe I know what happens when you die. On March 16, 2015, I was released from prison for the last time. It's what everybody called 12-12. And if you've been to prison or jail, you know what this means. But for everybody who had never been or know anyone that's been, it's when you finish everything. No more probation or parole. No more being on a run when you don't follow the rules or decide to get high or just stop reporting it to your parole officer. 12-12 means that you're a 100% free man. Free to do anything you want to do and go anywhere you want to go. You're literally reborn again. If you've ever gotten your freedom taken away, you'll understand my next statement. Finally getting your freedom back feels better than making love. No debate. But know that it feels incredibly good. Anyways, I was released from prison and I had to go back to my hometown, St. Louis, because that was the closest Greyhound station, and I was finally able to go back home to my family in Springfield, Missouri, and my first and only son, who was 3 at the time, my stepdaughter and baby mama, who I haven't seen for almost 3 years because I went back to prison in 2013, and after getting out, I was forced to go back to St. Louis Honor Center because she moved to Illinois and they don't home plan people to out-of-state residents. While in St. Louis Honor Center, I no longer had family or friend houses to go to on weekends because everybody either moved away or died since I've been gone. So I had nowhere to go but downtown St. Louis, where the Honor Center was located, and I quickly learned where everybody would be and started using what they were using, K2 or Spice. Now, all that said, let me get to the story. After getting released, I ended up back downtown because, like I said, that's where the Greyhound station was. And since I had close to 5 to 6 hours to waste before the bus leaves, I decided to go around the corner to the old stomping grounds to what's going on. But when I got there, nobody was out. It was like a ghost town. So I decided to head back to the Greyhound station, but as I turned around, I seen my dude D-Man rolling up, and when he sees me, his face lit up and he gave me a big bear hug, and then praised me on how good I look now that I'm not on all them drugs. After a brief conversation, he started telling me about how he's the man around there and he's got the best crack in K2 in town as we walked to the library where everybody be now. Not in the library, but around it while everybody sold whatever drugs they got. I let him know that I'm finally going back to Springfield and we might not ever see each other again, and he decided to roll a big joint of K2 to take away the pain and hurt of losing a good friend and for better days to come. I know. Crazy, right? And also noticed that I haven't smoked or gotten high for a really long time, so I still had virgin lungs and my tolerance was low. So we smoke, and while we're smoking, other people started coming up to buy crack and K2. The ones buying K2 fired up, and we started passing joints around like we're at Snoop Dogg's smokehouse, and all I can remember is me starting to throw up like crazy and thinking, God, I'm fitting to die, and then everything went black. And then like somebody pushed fast forward, I seen everything I'd ever done or thought in my life go by with incredible speed, and then I ended up in a parking lot trying to break into somebody's car, and then the person whose car it was there with a gun, and then he shot me in the head. I seen the spark of the gun, felt the pain, and then everything went black. I came to the darkest place I'd ever seen. I mean, the darkest of dark. And I couldn't see anything, but I could hear myself think. I could talk, but only in my mind. Am I dead? What happened? Oh God, is this all I'm gonna see for the rest of my days? I can see my hands. Oh God, Lord, please don't let this be it. Is this hell? What happened? Okay, think. What's the last thing you remember? While trying to remember, I remembered my past life. Everything I'd done and said. Everything I thought. And every crime I committed. But for the life of me, I couldn't remember what got me here. Then it hit me. Prison. Getting released. D-Man. Okay, what else? I remember now. Throwing up. Throwing up bad. And think I'm gonna die. Springfield. Son. My son. Did I ever see my son again? Did I ever get back to Springfield? See my baby mama? Stepdaughter? Then it hit me. I got shot in the head. For trying to steal somebody's car. Why was I trying to steal somebody's car? Better yet, why was I still in St. Louis? Why didn't I get on that Greyhound bus? My son. Oh God, I'll never see my son again. The whole time I was thinking these things, I couldn't see nothing but blackness. But the thoughts of my son finally brought me back to reality, and I was standing on the curb still throwing up on myself. I just decided to walk down to the Greyhound, but D-Man put his hand on my shoulder and told me to sit down. Just then the ambulance pulled up. Somebody called, but I didn't want to go, but D-Man told me to go and get checked out, so I did. On the way to the hospital, I needed to throw up more, so they gave me a throw-up bag and I threw up the whole ride there. After getting to the hospital, I told the doctor the truth about smoking K2, and after giving me the you shouldn't be doing that speech, they ran the tests and let me go after everything checked out. Before leaving, I took my pants off and washed off the throw-up with paper towels and eventually made my way to the Greyhound station. And even though I still had a lot of hours to wait, I didn't go back around the corner and stayed put. Eventually the bus came and I gave my ticket and got on the bus. The whole ride there I had to keep running into the bathroom to throw up, but finally after 5 hours I made it. You would think after that incident that my K2 days would be over. Wrong. But something really scary finally happened that made me stop for good, and now you can't pay me to smoke that. Let me know if you want to hear what happened, and until then, have any of you ever seen your life flash before your eyes in darkness? Abuelita used to tell me stories about her early years at the rural south of Mexico. She used to live in a small town surrounded by fields that would extend to the bottom of the mountains around the valley. These fields were owned and operated by the wealthy folks of the town, and like her parents, The rest would just work on the fields to earn a living. Because her parents were really poor, when she turned 16, she had to join them to work as a picker at their assigned parcela. Now, Abuelita told me that she was a pretty young woman, and for that same reason, her father wouldn't allow the other men to engage her. Anytime one of them would try to get near her, her father would just walk toward her in his menacing face. One day, however, the son of the parcela owner had come to the fields to check on them, and he had stopped right at her to ask her name. Abuelita's father wouldn't dare say a thing. In fact, he seemed rather inclined to the idea of his daughter marrying that kid, but still, to appear unbiased, he approached them in his usual face and asked her to go back to work. The owner's son simply went to check on the rest. Abuelita said that for a month or so, they would secretly meet by the edge of the field only for a brief moment. She was madly in love with him, or so she thought, and as soon as they realized those few minutes weren't enough, they decided to meet later at night so their parents, especially her father, wouldn't catch them. Excited at the prospect, she gave no second thought to their plan, and when the night fell and her parents were asleep already, she snuck outside and walked the dark unpaved streets to meet her secret lover at the same spot by the edge of the parcela. Since electricity was reserved only to agriculture machinery, they relied only on the light of the moon to take a stroll around without tripping or encountering a wild animal. For hours, they talked about each other, about what a life at the city was like, and he would tell her all about it, about the cars, the buildings, and that if they were to marry, he would take her to live there one day. Abuelita said after a while, he stole a kiss from her, and even though she didn't approve, she liked it. Yet the love spell she was under began to erode when he kept insisting on kissing her more and more. She kept repeating that she was uncomfortable and tired. Now, in retrospect, I fully understand the situation that was unfolding. Abuelita was raised as a hardcore Catholic, and such event was simply not meant to happen in such a manner, at least in her own beliefs. Besides, her parents would be livid had they found out what had happened, even if they were rooting for such a relationship. So, she pushed him. He wouldn't stop insisting. Then, having no other option, she cried out loud in the hopes of some of the valedores, the nighttime guards of the field, would listen to her pleas. It seemed that there was no one around, and they were, by then, too far away from town to be heard by her parents or the people living by the outskirts. In desperation, Abuelita said she could only think of praying in her head. She prayed to the Guadalupana, to the saints, and to God. She prayed so much she even believed there would be a divine intervention, that the Virgin Mary would come herself to set her free from his arms. Yet there was no Virgin Mary, she would tell me. What happened next would haunt her forever. From within the fields, lights began to spring from the thin air. The scene appeared as if people with torches were approaching them, thousands of them. The owner's son turned around and stopped forcing onto her, afraid of what they were seeing. Soon the lights caught up to where they were lying. They saw them. Those weren't torch lights. There were thousands of men and women and kids, all burning in yellow flames. Their flesh was intact, however, but their faces were those of sorrow and misery and fear. There was no eye contact. They simply walked by. They were speaking gibberish while holding their hands as if reciting the Lord's Prayer. Kids and adults alike, Abuelita said. When one of them walked just a couple of feet away, they felt the temperature go down rather than up, as if the fires were ice cold. The owner's son was in shock. He couldn't move, say, or do anything. Abuelita, on the other hand, kept praying, now with her eyes closed. She said she knew exactly who these folks were. The souls of purgatory, she told me. They saved me from, they saved me from Mijo. Their fire was to purify themselves to be worthy of heaven, but it didn't matter, because that night they were there for me. So every other night I make my prayers about them so that they can find salvation one day. I owe them. After the fire folks had left, disappearing from the fields and meeting the mountains at the horizon, Abuelita didn't think twice before sprinting back to town, to the safety of her parents. She couldn't speak for hours, until she did, only to alert them about her lover. They found him the next day. His hair was gray, and his sight seemed lost. he was dead. Abuelita said he passed away from fear, but I believe he might have simply been in shock too long and died from exposure. Either way, he was no longer among the living. She pondered upon if he had made it into purgatory or gone straight into the other, worse option. And if the former, was he going to wander the fields in case some other victim cried for divine intervention? I know, not the most orthodox thing to wonder, but that's just how she was, and I can't blame her. So that's her story. I know it's a little bit short, but she had many others from that rural town. She said that there's something about living so far from the bigger cities that entice the paranormal to spawn. Anyways, I always wanted to share them so that they don't die in oblivion. Maybe I'll share the rest some other time. Lastly, Abuelita, thank you for an amazing childhood and for all the experiences you shared with me. Even if they kept me awake so many nights, they eventually contributed to my love for scary stories, and for that, I'm truly grateful. This is a true paranormal story of the home I lived in from 13 years old. The old homestead Glencoe was built in the 1860s by convicts transported to Tasmania for whatever crime they had been found guilty of back in England. It was a huge old place, big enough that we, a family of 8, only used one half of it. The other half was blocked off and used for storage and the like. No one had lived in the old homestead for a quarter of a century before we moved in. It wasn't in the best of condition as a result, but Dad, as a builder and a stonemason, he did what needed to be done. But we all knew we weren't alone in that old house. We had guests, or perhaps they considered us the guests since they were there long before we moved in. At first, we laughed about Glencoe being haunted, making light of it and treating it as a bit of a joke. Yet we all knew it was very real, even if we didn't want to take it seriously. Glencoe had 4 resident ghostly beings that we knew of. The first 3 was a man called George, a woman called Matilda, and a young girl about 7 years of age we'll call Amelia. I'll talk about the 4th shortly. We assumed George, Matilda, and Amelia were the family who built the house. The graves of the original owners were on the property not far from the home. We didn't experience so many things often seen in claimed ghost videos. There were no slamming doors, no flickering lights, no moving curtains or any of the other things so often shown in ghost videos today. Only occasionally did we hear knocking within the walls. Even then, it was only in one area of the house, an old sunroom. We did, however, hear strange noises like footsteps and often felt as if someone or something was watching. Things moved on their own or went missing, only to turn up in the most unusual places. About 6 months after we moved in, George, Matilda, and Amelia decided to make themselves known. They weren't just ghostly faces peeking around corners either. They were full-bodied appearances standing in the hall or lounge or by the kitchen door. The child Amelia was often seen running around the house as if playing. All were always in 19th century clothing, and George, who we and visitors saw the most, always had his black top hat on. Yet the house never had a bad feeling about it. To the contrary, there was a friendly warmth within that house. Of course, that doesn't mean the ghosts didn't scare the bejesus out of us and visitors when they decided to appear. We grew used to living with them, however, and lived there for more than a decade. In all that time, George, Matilda, and Amelia never felt hostile. Rather, they seemed to be more curious than anything else and seemed happy to have us living there with them. It made it hard to have guests, though. More than one person entered that house only to run out and refuse to ever enter it again. Many a skeptic also left our house completely converted into a believer. The 4th entity was a different matter entirely. I say entity because I don't know what the 4th was. It was not the same as the other 3, and it was not friendly. While Matilda, George, and Amelia would appear where and whenever they pleased throughout the house, the 4th seemed to be confined to one particular room, a bedroom shared by my older sister and I. We called this entity Thing. Whoever or what it was, I still don't know, but Thing was utterly terrifying. And all the time we lived at Glencoe, no one ever saw Thing, yet we knew it was there. Even during the day, with the sun streaming through the large window chasing all the shadows out, that one room was a bad place. Whatever inhabited the room was something no one wanted anything to do with. The nights are worse. It seems strange to say a ghost or other entity breathes. After all, they're otherworldly beings and have no need to do so, yet it's the only way to describe what thing did. Lying in bed at night, my sister and I could hear things heavy breathing as it literally filled the room. It sounded as if though it had been running. Unseen eyes bored into us as we lay in bed, trying very hard to pretend it was nothing more than our imaginations. We could pretend all we liked, however. There was no doubt whatsoever thing existed in that particular room and had no intention of going anywhere. It also seems weird to say something we never saw was far scarier than the actual ghostly apparitions of George, Matilda, and Amelia, but it was. We could live with George, Matilda, and Amelia. They meant no harm, and had no problem with us living in the house with them. That didn't mean they liked everyone who came into the house, though. One time, George seemed to take exception to a group who came to visit. He appeared right in front of the man and his two friends, telling them to get out. The man actually walked through George, he was so close to them. The group let out terrified screams racing from the house and refusing to ever enter it again. Yet George and his family seemed to like us, and we never felt any hostility from them. The sounds of ghostly parties in the living room, the things going missing, the other weird sounds and strange occurrences in the house weren't bad. After living there for a while, we got used to it. But no one ever got used to Thing. Who or whatever inhabited that bedroom was utterly terrifying and came from hell itself, and that we were sure. One didn't have to see or even hear it to know that. One could just feel it the moment one entered that room. What was it? Another ghost? Who, unlike George, Matilda, and Amelia, was angry for some reason? Perhaps his life was cut short somehow and he resented it. Perhaps he was an evil bugger even in life and remained that way in death. Or maybe Thing was something else entirely. A demon, perhaps. One time my brother and his friend decided to use a Ouija board to find out. They claimed to have contacted a convict spirit who called himself Rabbit. What he'd done back in England to end up a convict transported to Tasmania was never discovered, but he was apparently hung on the property for murdering somebody. My brother and his friend were only young at the time they contacted Rabbit. It was never ascertained if their claims were true or if it was something they'd simply made up, although my brother to this day insists it really happened. Was Rabbit the Thing living in that room, angry because he'd been executed? Perhaps it was the person he murdered who was angry because he'd been killed. Even if the claims of my brother and his friend are true and they really did contact a spirit named Rabbit, I personally don't think Rabbit, or his victim for that matter, was the entity we called Thing. Whatever inhabited the bedroom was pure evil, and unlike George, Matilda, and Amelia, we were in no doubt Thing would do us harm if it could. Some nights it felt as if Thing was leaning right over me as I lay in bed, too scared to move. My sister had the same experiences, and so did others who spent a night in that room. One evening I walked into the bedroom and stopped as the hairs on my neck stood straight up as something gave a gruff chuckle. It was pure evil and felt as if though someone or something was right behind me, but when I got enough courage to turn, there was nothing there. I knew it was Thing. I had heard that awful chuckle before during that night. A part of me wanted Thing to appear so I could see what it was. The bigger part of me, though, didn't want to know, fearing what I might see. I was about 18 at the time. I'm in my 40s now, but to this day remember the feel of Thing in that chuckle. Some years later, we discovered an 8-year-old girl died in that room after falling into the fireplace and sustaining severe burns. Was it the little blonde-haired ghost child we called Amelia? We never found out, but assumed it was. Was Thing somehow connected to that death? Who knows? I only know Thing lived in that room and was pure evil. We left Glencoe after Dad's sudden death in December of 1994. Without his skills as a builder and stonemason to see to the upkeep of the house, it was impossible to keep it in livable condition. It was just too big and too old. We said goodbye to George, Matilda, and Amelia in mid-1995. No one has lived in the house since, although I hear the current owners of the property want to renovate the house and turn it into a hotel and conference center. I've no doubt George, Matilda, and Amelia still live there, and I'm sure Thing is still there in that bedroom as well. If the old place is turned into a hotel and conference center, I wonder what the ghosts of Glencoe will think about it. So a word of warning. If it does become a hotel and you should decide to stay there, say hello to George, Matilda, and Amelia. If they like you, you'll feel welcome there. If they don't, well, all I can say is you'll know all about it, and it's unlikely you'll ever be game enough to stay there long. As for Thing, if you stay in the first bedroom on the left next to what was originally an old sunroom, you'll quickly know what I'm talking about when you realize you're sharing a room with a terrifying entity. Are you game enough to stay in a room inhabited by something from hell itself? I would go back. Despite Thing, I love that old place and I hope one day to return. If I do, I hope I see the ghosts of Glencoe one last time. A part of me still wants to know what Thing is and why it's there. I was in my mid-20s when we left the house, and still after all these years I wonder about Thing. It was a terrifying yet strangely fascinating entity, but I'm not sure I'd have the courage to face Thing. It's easy to say I would while not at the house, but to go back into that room would be different entirely. I still remember the feeling of evil and terror in that room. It's not something one forgets, believe me. I firmly believe even now, if Thing had the power to kill someone, it would. This story came up when I was talking to my grandma about cattle mutilations. I was talking about a deer skin being found in the woods by some guy while he was camping, and my grandmother suddenly gasped. She then went on to tell me that when she was 26, she was home alone sleeping one day while my grandpa was at work and my mom was at school. She said that at some point through her sleep, she was startled awake by a semi-loud boom coming from the highway. She got dressed and went out to investigate and almost immediately noticed a giant red blob right on the yellow line of the road. She said that as she neared closer to it, she realized it was a horse, a skinless horse. She described it as having absolutely no skin at all and said that she could see every nerve, every vein, and all of the muscle on it, dead, laying in the road. She said 2 truck drivers pulled over to stare at the horse as well, and that they were so weirded out by it that they just stared at it for a while. My grandmother said she called the police out there and it was cleaned up. My mom recounted the story as well, saying that my grandmother seemed a bit on edge the whole day, and my mom remembered being a bit creeped out too. I'm not sure of how real it is, but I hope I never have to experience something like this. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. And if you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, ghosts are just farts that never got smelt. My name is Evan. I live in northern Alabama and will be moving soon. I currently live in a quiet neighborhood with my mom, dad, little brother, and dog. This happened during summer vacation when I was 10 years old. Every day I had chores to do, and on Mondays and Tuesdays I had an extra chore. On Monday I had to take the recycling bin to the road since recycling day is on Tuesday. On Tuesday I would put the trash to the road because trash day was on Wednesday. Sometimes people would drive by while I was outside and I would wave to them. So it was a normal Tuesday afternoon around 3:30, and I went outside to go get the recycling bin while I brought the trash to the road. When I got to the edge of the road with the trash, someone was coming up the road. After I had gotten the mail, I gave them a wave, but then they honked at me. When I closed the mailbox, they pulled up next to one of my neighbor's houses on the opposite side of the road. I barely remember what the truck looked like, but I think it was either an old rusty dark red, dark blue, or black 1989 Dodge Ram heavy-duty pickup truck. A man stepped out of the truck and made eye contact with me. He was African American and had dreadlocks for his hair, and he looked like he was in his mid-20s or late 30s. When we made eye contact, he smiled and waved me over. "Come here," he said. My heart skipped a beat when I heard him say this. Thankfully, my 10-year-old self knew that this was trouble. I began walking towards my house and he called out to me again. I don't entirely remember what he said, but I remember it being something along the lines of, "Don't tell your mom." I had already gotten inside by the time he finished that sentence. I immediately ran into the kitchen where my mom was washing dishes. When I told her, she was shocked by this and immediately told my dad, who had just woken up from a nap. My dad confronted the guy, and after a few minutes he came back inside. Apparently my dad told me that the man wanted to give me something. After a few more minutes I saw the truck drive away, and I'd never seen that truck or that man again. Now, I probably know what you're thinking. How is this scary? Well, let me ask you this. Why would a grown man driving an old rusty-looking pickup truck tell a 10-year-old kid to come over to him? Think about that for a second. Would you think that's normal? Would you think it's normal for a grown man to say that he wanted to give something to a 10-year-old kid? I wouldn't. And as it turns out, after turning on the morning news the next day, guess which face I see as a police sketch art plastered across our television? The guy from last night. Apparently only 2 neighborhoods over, the same situation occurred to a girl named Natalie from a grade below me. She was out in her front yard playing and had followed his command to come closer to his vehicle. As she got within arm's reach, he quickly opened his door, attempting to reach and grab her. The girl hurtled back, and the man retreated to his vehicle and drove off upon her 80-pound pit bull, recognizing the danger and jumping to action. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but this incident gave me a pretty direct clue to what intentions this man had for me. This happened when I was about 8 or 9. I wish I knew more details about what happened because the memories are sort of a blur to me now, and my mom doesn't like to talk about this. My mom used to work at a gym as a Zumba teacher. Because of that, my mom, brother, and I had free memberships, and we would be there pretty much on a daily basis. All the employees at the gym were very good friends with each other, so my mom was close with a lot of them. One of her closer friends was a receptionist at the front desk who was named Danny. Danny was your average 20-something-year-old guy. I remember from all the times he would sign us into the gym that he was super nice, and he had a wife and 2 younger kids, about 5 or 6 years old. One day, at about 2.5 years after she had first gotten her job at the gym, my mom picked me up from school, crying her eyes out. We had had some struggles with money due to some family issues around that time, so I thought this was normal because of all the stress she was under. When I got into the car, I asked her if she was okay. She said no, and I asked if it was about the money, being the nosy little child I was. What she told me scared me and still gives me a chill down my spine when I think about it. The previous night, Danny was expecting to receive a PlayStation from someone on Craigslist. He and the owner of the PlayStation had exchanged numbers, so when he saw his phone go off and a car pull up next to his condo, he went outside with the money to buy it. His wife was in the kitchen making dinner, and his kids were playing in their rooms. Danny told his wife he was going to go outside to pick up the PlayStation and hurried out the door. The car had tinted windows, my mom told me, so he couldn't really see who was inside. Danny went up to the passenger window, and whoever was inside rolled down the window. In that moment, there were 2 very concerning things in the car. There was no PlayStation, and one of the 2 people inside was holding a gun. Before he could yell for help or call the cops, the man with the gun demanded that Danny give him his money. He handed over the money to him instantly. After he received the phone, the guy with the gun shot Danny in the chest numerous times, and he and the other man in the car drove away. I don't know exactly how, but his wife and neighbors found out what happened and called the cops. Danny's body was found in some bushes outside he and his wife's condo. An innocent man who happened to be both a husband and a father to 2 young children was shot dead by 2 scammers from Craigslist over $100. My mom was devastated about what happened, and for about 6 months after the shooting, my family would sometimes bring them to dinner. My mom and Danny's wife would talk in the living room for a couple of hours while my brother and I played with the kids. The kids had never really processed what had happened. They just thought their dad was on vacation, and that still to this day breaks my heart. It's been about 7 or 8 years since this happened, and we lost touch with the family and all the gym employees after a year after the shooting, when my mom eventually quit her job. Let me start off by explaining that the following events have taken place in 4 different houses. Also, you should know that I was 12 when they started. I by no means am fit and have a lot of social anxiety, so I do not go out often. Now to the events. When I was 12 or so, my family, mom, dad, and brother, were renting. But one night I was lying in bed home alone. Scared of the dark, I left the bathroom light on with the door cracked. An hour into the night, I was starting to fall asleep when, in the corner of my eye, I noticed someone's shadow on the wall. Not standing, like they were on the wall. Hands and feet. I don't know what I saw, but it can stay away. About a week later, on another night, the door was almost kicked down. I don't know if something scared the intruder. My family was convinced to move away, so we did move to the next town over. More of a rural town than the previous that I said. Now to the interesting part of this story, we moved into a 2-story house. There was a ground floor. The second level, the attic, no one ever went into it when we moved in. That'll become irrelevant later. There was a sub-basement, and then a full basement. We had a pretty big privacy fence around the backyard. Anyway, I had lived in the second-story room with a window that overlooks the front yard. I have severe insomnia, so one night I was stargazing when I noticed a red dot on my wall. I looked outside and saw a red gaze from someone else's window. We don't have any kids in the neighborhood, so what was the light? It moved to me when I popped up. I was an idiot. I kept looking outside, looking for the source of the light. I ended up finding it in the second story of the house across the way. Fast forward a few nights and I am in the sub-basement. It has 2 windows that if you duck down you are below ground. I had the lights off and was just checking the windows for the night, making sure they were all locked. They were before I went back to my room. I used the restroom on that floor. After doing my business and washing, I opened the door. Now remember, it was pitch black throughout the house, so through the windows I checked, beams of light rushed through. They moved from window to window. Someone has to be scouting my home. Being as smart as a 16-year-old could get, I walked over to the porch lights and turned them on and off. The lights turned off fast, and when I looked out, nothing. I sat on my bed looking out over the yard till I fell asleep. The following day, I inspected the windows and door. The door has a crack by the lock where someone attempted to break in. A few months later, the attic panel had been cracked and chunks of it were laying on the ground. We never replaced it, so for the next 2 years we lived there. The panel had a corner missing. If we shined a flashlight, you could see into it. I do not know why, but I always had a bad feeling about that place. I moved out last year, and my new place already had someone try to break in. I struggle to sleep at night because I'm afraid one day, whatever or whoever it is, will finally find a way in. My husband moved around a lot as a kid, and at one point, his grandfather had custody of him due to his parents having issues. They lived in the Bay Area of California at that time and grew really close. His grandfather passed away when we were teenagers, so I never met his grandfather and neither did our children. In the summer of 2015, we moved to Tuolumne County, and I had my younger cousins come and stay the weekend so I could take them to visit Yosemite since it isn't far off from where we live. My cousins were sleeping in the living room on our couch and lazy boy when I was woken up at around 3 a.m., hearing footsteps outside my door. Thinking one of them may have been awake, I got up to check on them and make sure they were okay. Both were laying there awake with the hugest eyes I've ever seen. Once they noticed me, they began a barrage of questions, most of which consisted of asking me about that old man and if he lived with us, which of course creeped me out because it was just my husband and I who lived in the apartment. I instantly double-checked my front door. It was still locked. I also began checking all over the apartment for the old man, which I should have found since it was a small one-bedroom and nobody, besides us of course, was there. The next day, they told my husband about the old man, and he laughed, saying maybe we're all just tired and seeing things, and at one point even thought we were trying to prank him. Fast forward to the summer of 2017, and we then lived in a larger apartment with 2 bathrooms. I had my little cousin, a different cousin this time, come stay the night to have a play date with my daughter. Being 9, he opted to stay up playing the PlayStation 4 in the living room instead of actually going to bed. The next morning, we were having breakfast when my little cousin asked me about the old man. My husband began to laugh and basically said, "This didn't work the last time and it won't work this time," again believing we were trying to play a prank. That night, my cousin went to bed in the room with my daughter and woke up the next day saying the old man covered both him and my daughter up in the middle of the night so they wouldn't be cold. He said he asked, "Who are you?" and the man put his finger to his lips in a shh gesture and then left the room. At this point, I became curious and asked what the old man looked like. My cousin began describing the old man and my husband went completely pale and then went to the bookshelf and pulled out a photo album and opened it up to a page in the middle with a photo of him and his grandfather. He showed my cousin, who responded with, "Yeah, that's him." Then came the first week of my son coming home from the hospital this past January. My son had feeding issues as a baby and would spit up a lot. After I put my kids to sleep, I went to take a shower. A few minutes later, I heard someone pounding on the bathroom door and a male voice screaming to come quick. I didn't think, I just ran out of the shower and into my children's room. My son had spit up in his sleep and was choking on it. I was able to clear his throat and calm him down and get him back to bed. It then dawned on me my husband was at work, so there was no man in the house. And if there was, how come his banging on the door and very loud screaming didn't wake up my daughter? The next day, I brought it up to my husband, who got kind of creeped out over it. Then my daughter came up to us and said to my husband, "No, Scary, Papa was here." I was very afraid of the old man at first, but after this, I'm no longer afraid. At this point, I can only be thankful that my husband's grandfather is coming to visit my family, because if he didn't, my son could have died that night. So a few days ago, around 9 p.m., I was on the way to my aunt's house, which takes about an hour. As we were on the way there, nothing creepy happened until we came along to her driveway. The driveway is a very long gravel way, it has a few holes here and there, and is shaded with trees all along it. We slowly drove down, and I was staring out the window to see a man standing behind a tree. I thought it was my cousin because he seemed to do that a lot. After entering the house, I asked my aunt where my cousin was, and she said that he was out of town with his mom. It made my heart drop to my stomach. A few hours go by, and it was 11 p.m. We said our goodnights and left. We get in the car and we start to leave. As we got to the end of the way, I noticed the man again in the same place. As we got onto the main road, he disappeared into thin air. I was a little weirded out and decided to call my aunt, and she said that she would let her dogs out to scare whoever it was off, but they never barked. She told me that she would keep the door open throughout the night and let the dogs have full access of the entire yard, just to be on the safe side. We drove for about 15 minutes. When we stopped at a stoplight, I was surveying the outside and saw a man in an empty parking lot only lit by a streetlight, just standing there with his head completely laying on his shoulder again. My heart dropped into my stomach. We drove off, and after me scanning out the window for a while, I saw the same man again in another parking lot standing the same way. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me this whole time because I don't get much sleep due to my paranoia, but I was wide awake. We got back to the town that I live in, and we stopped to get gas. My mom goes into the gas station to pay and to get some snacks, and I was playing with my phone when I get the sudden urge to look up. When I did, I saw the man about 100 feet away from the car, standing behind a large bush, slowly walking towards me, just walking into the bush. Then my mom swings the door open, looking at her phone, so my attention shot to her. When I looked back to where the man was standing, he was gone. We left, and I didn't see anything, which gave me relief until we got to my house. We got out of the car and started to head in. I then realized I left my phone in the car. I rushed back to get it, but as I go to open the door, I saw the man at the end of my driveway. My eyes got wide and I got very scared. Keep in mind, I'm only 5'4", 135 pounds, and this man looks to be about 7 feet tall. I was frozen until he started to walk ever so slowly. I quickly got my phone, and as soon as I shut the car door and looked back at him, he stood completely still. As soon as I took a step back, he started a full-on sprint my direction. My adrenaline kicked in and I booked it into the house. I slammed the front door and my mom looked at me very concerned. I told her about it, then looked out the window to show her, but once again, he was gone. I had not seen this man for a while, although I have weird taps on my window every night at 1 a.m., right on the dot. I'm reminded of this encounter every Thanksgiving. This happened when I was about 14. I was visiting my grandmother for Thanksgiving, who didn't exactly live in the nicest town. In fact, it was pretty scummy, although it used to be nicer. A lot of my family lived there, though, and they would all come to my grandmother's for Thanksgiving dinner. This included my cousins, 2 20-year-old males, who my brother and I would hang out with when we were bored. Since all of my relatives were talking, we had nothing better to do. My cousins offered to take a walk with my brother and me. I grabbed a flashlight since it was pitch black out, and we started on our way. We walked down the street, turned the corner, and went under the overpass. We walked up a hill, crossed through a parking lot, and went down a few streets when we reached the downtown area. It was basically a ghost town, as everyone was home with their families, except for a few people in a few cars. We kept walking and talking for several minutes until we noticed the silhouette of a man about 100 yards behind us. We didn't really pay any attention to him, though, as there was nothing out of the ordinary yet. About 5 minutes later, we were getting really cold, so we turned around and headed back to our family. We crossed the street and went back through the parking lot and kept walking when my brother pointed out that the same man was on the sidewalk in front of the lot. He was just standing there and he appeared to be watching us. We stopped, and I was getting pretty suspicious at this point, but my cousins assured me that I was just being paranoid. We continued to walk down the lot and onto the sidewalk on the other side of the lot when the man started walking parallel to us. My brother and I were really starting to get freaked out now, but my cousins assured us that we were fine. We started to walk faster while I kept an eye on the man still walking parallel to us through the gaps in between the buildings. We walked past a few more buildings, but I stopped seeing him in the spaces in between them. This made me calmer, but I also had this weird, eerie feeling. We went back down the hill, making sure he wasn't following us, being teased by my cousins for being paranoid. We started to walk under the overpass when one of my cousins said, "What if he showed up behind us?" He laughed, but This made me even more frightened. I turned on my flashlight and shined it behind us. My jaw dropped, because not 50 feet behind me I saw the man come out from behind a pole of the overpass. I screamed, which caused my cousins to turn around. When they saw what I saw, they told us to run, and we all booked it. We kept running as fast as we could and finally got to my grandmother's. We ran in, slammed and locked the door, and started to hyperventilate. We told her family what had happened, but our cousins made it out to be less scary than it actually was. It was a good thing we were leaving for home about an hour later, but I still wonder what he would have done to us if he'd caught us. I was raised Baptist until I was 11 and then converted to Catholicism. Around age 13, I decided I didn't agree with many of the Catholic practices. I went to my dad and told him I didn't want to go to church anymore and stated my reasons why. My dad asked what my plan was for my soul. I explained to him that I definitely believe in God and just wanted to explore other religions, so he allowed me to do my own thing. I went to other churches occasionally just to learn why different religions believed what they believed. Fast forward about 17 years, I'm now about 30 years old. My best friend at the time was my neighbor. She believed in the power of the universe, karma, etc., but isn't comfortable with titles like God and such. We would have lots of deep theological conversations. Sometimes we agreed, sometimes we didn't, but we respected each other's opinions and differences. She starts dating a guy from another state online, and eventually he moves to our state and moves in with her. She makes sure to inform me that he is an atheist, in case he makes any statements that offend me, I guess. Now, I know this guy can talk because when I'm on the phone with her, I can hear him talking to other people in the background. But anytime I would go over there, he wouldn't utter a word. If he had anything to say, he would whisper it in her ear. I found this incredibly strange and wondered if he was talking about me or what. One day, I'm surfing the web and happened to come across something and notice his name, except it has Reverend in front of his name. I was puzzled and intrigued, so I clicked on it. Turns out, it's his personal website. He's not an atheist. He's a Satanist. He has numerous vlogs and web shows on this channel where he's preaching from the Satanic Bible, so he can definitely talk, and quite elegantly, which surprises me and also confuses me. I'm on the phone with my dad one day and tell him about this guy and how I'm confused as to why he won't speak around me. What my dad says gives me chills. Jennifer, you're a very strong spirit. It's not that he won't speak around you. He can't speak around you. Your spirit silences his demons. I live with my husband in Hawaii. The move from the mainland has been challenging, to say the least. I have always found comfort in stuffed animals and have a growing collection. My husband plays video games and got me invested in his Switch. We play a lot of Super Mario Party because I think it's fun and I think Boo is really cute. Because Goomba has a larger role in this game, he got my attention. I ended up playing as him a couple of times and fell for his cuteness as well. So, like I do, I went and bought a plush Goomba to add to my collection. He came within a week and I was not disappointed. Only a little to my surprise, my husband really likes him too. So much so, I sometimes catch him cuddling with him when I come back from the bathroom at night. I have a condition that makes going to the bathroom a whole epic event. Sometimes my husband and I tease each other using the Goomba, holding him and making him nod or shake his head yes and no questions, making it seem like he likes one over the other, stuff like that. He started to take on his own personality through this, and sometimes we accuse each other of changing his answers, all in jest, of course. One day, though, I woke up from a nap a little chilly and decided to turn off the fan. I got up, leaving Goomba propped up against my pillow, and leaned against my husband on his computer to turn off the fan. It should be noted my husband was not in bed with me. We just have a really small apartment. When I turned around to lay back down, Goomba was right beside me, on his 2 feet and looking at me. I didn't really respond except to furrow my brow and ask my husband if he'd moved Goomba to prank me. He said no, and I believe him. His whole attention was on his screen. He works at the local university, and it was the week before finals, and on top of that, he usually owns up to his pranks. On top of that, I hadn't felt or seen him move. In the end, I concluded that he must have rolled when I moved across the mattress because he's just plush and not really alive. But because of the games my husband and I play with him, I like to think he just really wanted my attention that day. But what do you think? Do you guys think it was just a coincidence he moved the way he did, or could something paranormal have happened? I don't really believe in special people seeing paranormal things. Not that I'm a non-believer, I just don't understand why so many people on the planet and only a few can do so. This becomes important, I think. I was abused as a child. I was beat and burned by my parents and the strangers they continuously let in the house. Unfortunately, I don't really remember this as I was under 5. My foster parents tell me everything truthfully. However, my mother was a Wiccan and she would continuously curse and hex myself and my family. I worked this out with letters and strange markings on my body that only appeared after my foster parents gave my mother some visits to me. Growing up, I was diagnosed with autism and then bipolar disorder type 2, and now at 26, PTSD from my mother's actions. When I was little, I had strange things happen to me. My bed would irk up in the middle as though someone was pushing at it from underneath, and I would see a black, misty person stand at my bedroom door. I should mention I didn't start suffering from sleep paralysis until I was 18. My foster father, to help get over my fear of the dark, had me run down my backyard at night one night and back to the house. I did this crying and begging not to, but I did it anyway. As I got past the shed, I saw the same figure standing at the corner of the shed with its big red eyes staring at me, and it charged towards me as I stared. I was knocked to the ground and heard my foster father run screaming down the yard as he saw what happened, but when he got there, the black mist had gone. A few months later, a drunk driver had crashed out the front of our house and woke my parents up and myself, who rushed outside to help him. They told me to wait inside and don't look at the car. I think they did that because, in case they didn't want me to see a mangled dead body. As I turned around, I saw the black mass with red eyes at my bedroom door and charged at me again, though this time I screamed so hard my foster mother had come back and picked me up as it had vanished, as though she was a safety net that could protect me from anything. I ended up moving out of home at around the age of 20 due to my brother having his girlfriend at the time gotten pregnant and they needed my room for the baby. I moved out, and this is where things began to get more detailed. I began suffering from sleep paralysis, and my computer, which was in my lounge room, began to randomly turn itself on at night, but I never noticed it until the morning. I lived alone, and every time I had sleep paralysis, I would be facing the door to my bathroom, which was quite small, and had a white shower curtain that had a lot of mold on it. As living there got worse, and so did my sleep paralysis, I began to vividly see my bathroom door open, and there would be a girl and a boy standing in my bathtub. With each passing episode, they would get closer and closer to my door. After a couple of years, I began to see more and more strange things in my apartment. My neighbor downstairs was suffering from some mental disability which proned him to wild, aggressive situations and bashing on my door at night. A few times it would wake me from nightmares, and I was grateful at times for it. I was honestly terrified overall. I moved into my new house and with my now fiancé and future husband. I guess if you have to know, I am gay and 26 and covered in tattoos. I still see the mist with red eyes and the 2 children from my old apartment every now and then, but now in my new house I see a very old woman in my dreams. She doesn't do anything but stand in my bedroom mirror, not facing it, but inside it, her hair waving in the air like a banshee and just watching me. She looks like my mother if she were in her 80s. I don't think I am special, and I don't believe I am spiritual or mad. I think I am more likely a schizophrenic, if anything. Or am I? I would love to know if anyone has had anything similar happen. This happened to me back in 7th grade, and my memory of this occurrence might be slightly fuzzy. My day started out like any other. I woke up groggy and half awake and wasted half my energy slipping into my clothes. I got the rest of my routine done and everything was fine. Grabbed my backpack and headed into the car with my 6-month pregnant mom, soon to have my sister. My brother had to go to school at a later time than me, as he was still in elementary, so my dad, being the jobless couch potato he is, stays behind to watch the house. He usually sees us out and opens the gate for us to drive out. Now, to explain the layout of our garage and driveway, trust me, it will hopefully answer a question you will have that I don't want to answer later. I have a back porch with a back door that leads to a garage on the side of the house. We have a gate so nobody simply waltzes into the back of our house, obviously, and this gate leads to our actual driveway and then out to the street. Now, when my dad opens the gate and my mom drives out, then we notice a car parked on the street past the corner of our driveway. We couldn't see them as they were angled to where our house and front plants blocked view on the side of the street. As soon as my mom got into the driveway and my dad closed the gate, this car blocks us into our driveway. 3 men hopped out of the car dressed in what seems like police clothing and start banging on the windows of our car. 2 of these men are armed with police batons and one has what seems like a handgun. The man with the handgun is demanding for us to unlock the doors and get out, all the while pointing the gun at my pregnant mother. My mom actually works in our school system here and knows well enough what the police uniforms look like and did not oblige to their demands, simply saying in shock, "You're not cops. You're not police. You're not the cops." One of the baton men are banging at my window, and the last of the 3 is screaming at my dad to open the gate, and my dad scurries back to the house since 1, he's naked, and 2, the man with the pistol moved from my mom's window to screaming at him and pointing the gun at him. Now, another man I did not address was the car's driver, who was still in the car. For some reason, he moves the car slightly forward, and this gives my mom the golden opportunity to absolutely deck the gas and book it out of the driveway. The 3 men flee to their car, and my mom, like a madman, swerves the car and starts chasing the men's car since we didn't get a license plate. My mom calls up the police and starts frantically explaining the situation. So my mom is chasing this car for a good 5 minutes out of the neighborhood and into a traffic-heavy main street. The car we were chasing nearly crashed into a ditch while we were chasing them, but thanks to their slow speed, they were able to change direction quickly and book it away, and my mom lost sight of them after they blended back into other traffic. I think I was the only one to get a good look at the license plates, but even then was only able to remember about 3 characters. Since they escaped, my mom really didn't know what to do other than to send us back to school and hopefully pass this day somewhat normally until the police come after school and ask us for details. I go by most of the school day until one of my friends notices my shaken up mood and asks what's wrong. I completely break down in class and cannot hold any tears back. I get home from school and later the police come and ask for more details, yada yada. I give them about the only 3 characters I remember from the license plate, and that's about all the important parts I can remember. I'm surprised I've been able to live this moment down, as 3 lives could have been lost, one not yet even having a single moment with their family. So, I really don't know who to thank other than the other driver's idiotic mind and my mom's quick thinking for us still being alive. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video, like everybody's today. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon. and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. All links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon. I moved to South Korea for university when I turned 18. I'm now 21, and this happened over 2 years ago. Whilst there has definitely been unwanted attention from some guys in the past, most of them get the message that I'm not interested. This, however, was a little more unsettling. The university I go to has an institute for language, which is where all of my classes were at the time, and it's pretty common knowledge that most foreigners in this part of Korea would know of or study at this institute. It's not abnormal for me to receive random Facebook requests from guys wanting to learn English or make foreign friends, and most of the time I just ignore them unless we have a few mutual friends or I've met them before. I got a friend request from this guy named Nico, and we had quite a handful of mutual friends, and he'd messaged me too saying he was sorry for the randomness of the request, but he was just trying to make as many foreign friends as he could. I thought, what the heck, and I accepted and messaged him back saying it was no bother. From what I could tell by his Facebook photos, he was heavily pierced and tattooed and stated he was Japanese, but had studied in Canada and could speak good English, and also a foreigner studying at my university. After a few days, he'd messaged me again and I replied, and it was casual conversation, and he would often bring up maybe meeting for coffee or a movie, which I declined, until he started getting more aggressive for no reason. Every time I'd make a comment, he'd find some way to turn it into an argument, which grew tiring super fast, so I just ignored him. He'd often ask if I had a boyfriend, to which I'd reply no, and he'd bluntly say that we should be together. It was at this point where I decided I didn't really want anything to do with him, so I politely declined on the basis I didn't know him, we'd never meet, and we hadn't even known each other a week. He didn't take my refusal well, and began throwing insults at me based on my looks and saying overly graphic things that he'd do to me if he ever saw me. Apparently I was being stupid not to take him up on the offer because I'd never do better than him and he'd make me see that. It creeped me out beyond belief, so I just blocked and deleted him on Facebook and tried to forget about it. I mentioned it to a friend of mine and she immediately knew exactly who I was talking about. Apparently I was not the first girl he added on Facebook and tried to bully into meeting him and being his girlfriend. After asking a few more of my friends who we'd had as mutual friends on Facebook, they'd all describe pretty similar situations involving this Nico. One girl even told me that she'd given him the benefit of the doubt and met with him, and it turned out that he didn't even go to our university, but actually lived over an hour away and would travel there daily, probably to watch and obsess over which girl he would find on Facebook next. He told her he was born in America and had never been to Japan, yet he told me he was Japanese and studied in Canada, so who knows how much of what he said to anyone was actually true. I felt a bit freaked out by this, but tried not to let it bother me. I'd never see him around and I'd blocked him, so I forgot about it. And that was until about a week or two later I received a message from him on Facebook on another account saying how he'd seen me that day at school. This shook me up a bit, since I hadn't even considered that he might actually be watching me at school. I ignored the message and blocked the account. A few days later I got numerous messages from different accounts claiming to be Nico's friends, saying how he had his account hacked and could I please unblock him so he could explain and we could talk it over. I ignored these messages too, but I kept receiving more, all of which I am pretty sure were just Nico himself trying to reach out to me to get my attention. The more I ignored him, the more violent and aggressive the messages became, and I could tell that most of the time when he said he'd seen me, he was lying. He'd say things like, "I saw you today at the library all day, you fucking slut. You're a fucking four-eyed slut who can't get laid," and other messages to that extent. I knew he was clutching at straws because I never used the school's library to study, and although I wear glasses, I never wear them in public. So I just kept blocking the accounts and tried not to let it bother me, figuring he was just some desperate idiot. I figured he'd get bored of me soon enough and let it go. Until one day after classes had finished and I was browsing the small convenience store in the building to grab a drink on my way home. I opened up the fridge to get a bottle of water when I closed the door. He was literally standing right beside me. He didn't say anything. He was just staring at me. I hadn't seen him in person before because I had never agreed to meet him, but I knew straight away it was him. And I freaked out. I dropped the bottle and I just left the store. I didn't walk home because I was afraid he'd follow me and find out where I lived. So I just went back into school and stayed around areas where there were lots of people until a friend of mine came to meet me. After that, I saw him a handful of times when I'd leave class. He'd just be standing there doing nothing in particular, watching people as they walked past, and he'd stare at me intently. I'd made sure to always be with friends when I went to and from class and didn't go anywhere alone for a while, but after a week or so the messages stopped and I didn't see him again. The last time I heard from him was a year ago when he messaged me on yet a new Facebook account asking if we could be friends again because he'd changed and it was all just a joke. Needless to say, I ignored the message, blocked the account, and will not be taking up his offer on being friends. I dated my last serious boyfriend for around 6 years, and throughout the whole of those 6 years, I always received pokes off of a fellow on Facebook. I didn't think too much of it, and we had like 30 friends in common, so I figured maybe I had met him somewhere along the way. Besides, he was muscly and quite attractive, so having the additional attention was fun, I guess. A couple of weeks after my ex and I split, he private messaged me asking me if we could meet. We chatted for a while and I eventually agreed to go for a meal with him. On first date terms, it was a pretty lovely one. Nice meal, walk under the stars, blah blah blah. After a few weeks of seeing him, I noticed little traits in his behavior that I found to be particularly strange. He would never let me in his house and would leave me standing outside. One day I stood outside of his house for 45 minutes at 10:30 p.m. as we had walked there. I didn't know where the hell I was, and he decided that I had given him the hump for no apparent reason. This is where I should have bailed out. The following Friday, I figured I would give him the benefit of the doubt and invited him round. He stayed for 9 days. I had to text a friend asking her to pick me up and not invite him just to get him out. I figured I would leave it now, until he turned up on my doorstep the next day. I told him I wasn't very well and that I had a pretty serious urinary tract infection, which was met with a lot of accusations of cheating and even being a slag. This was the final straw, and I told him to leave and not to bother contacting me. Every day I received text after text, missed call after missed call. I blocked him on Facebook, so he messaged all of my friends begging them to convince me to take him back. Hell no. I figured that after some time he would back away. Things went quiet for about a week. It was bliss until I received a call off a number I didn't know. It was asking me who the man was who had just walked in front of my door. It was my father, by the way. This happened every time someone walked in front of my flat. Male, female, it didn't matter. Turned out he knew someone who lived across the street from me and had him and his lovely girlfriend watching my every move. Things calmed down again after speaking to the couple and explaining the grief it had caused me. He told them that he was still together with me and he was concerned for my safety. And I thought he had got the message until one day when I finished work and caught the bus home. I had this perfectly timed so that I would always be pulling up to my estate at 6 p.m. As I strolled down the hill to my estate, ready to cut through the alley towards the garages, I noticed a figure tucked away in the shadows in the corner. It was him. I kept my head up and marched onwards to my front door. He followed a distance behind until I reached the door and ran after me and chased me up the stairs in the block of flats I lived in. I told him I wasn't interested, that he was scaring me, and that he needed help. And this is where he thought that maybe a hug would change my mind in this situation. After letting out a massive scream from my neighbor, he was escorted out of the building and was told that if he returned, it probably would be the last thing he had ever done. At least I have learned now not to date people off of Facebook and at least run a background check on any future partners. I'm a 22-year-old female and I'm finishing up my first college degree this summer. So I take mainly online classes as I work and volunteer a lot. However, this semester I only had 2 science classes left in order to graduate, and one of the classes I needed was only offered on campus. It's a twice-a-week class and each class runs roughly 2 hours, but the teacher usually lets us go after about 45 to 60 minutes. I live kind of far from the campus, so I usually walk in about 15 minutes late and therefore never get called for attendance. The teacher knows my situation and I just have to let him know that I'm there before I leave class and we're good. I know this may not seem important, but I promise it is. So my class has a test on this upcoming week. The teacher gives us study guides that are pretty similar to the actual test questions, but they aren't like required to pass the test or anything. A lot of it is common sense. So today I am hanging out at my coworker's house when my phone goes off. I checked it and saw I had a Facebook message from a person I didn't recognize. So I opened the message. It was not a name I had ever heard or remember hearing. It's a pretty unique name, so I was sort of confused. The message read, "Hey, I am in your Intro to Science class. I really need a study guide and would drive to your house if it meant accessing it." So immediately I'm a little weirded out because I literally have no idea who this guy is. I don't recognize him from the class, and I certainly don't recognize his name. Not to mention, like I said earlier, I am literally never there for attendance, so it couldn't be easily explained as like he saw me answer for my name or anything. So then I'm thinking maybe he looked at the class roster online and messaged a bunch of people. So I texted a few of my classmates to see if they had heard from this guy, and they all said no and asked why I wanted to know. I explained the situation to them, and they verified they didn't recognize the guy's name or face, and they're good students who actually show up to class on time. So I didn't message the guy back, obviously, and he messaged me again a few hours later saying, "Come on, I know you read this." And now I am even more creeped out. The teacher has been offering the study guide for like 2 weeks in class, so I really don't understand why he wouldn't have a copy. Not to mention, he could have contacted the teacher for a copy as we still have several days until the test. If he looked up the roster online, why would he have only messaged me and not my other classmates? Maybe I'm overreacting, but I feel like it's super creepy. I'm a 20-something woman, American and a Francophile, fluent but not native in French. Since 2011, I've been in correspondence with an eccentric French guy I met because he posted a clip of a super rare telefilm on YouTube. We had a bunch of mutual interests and eventually met in real life so he could give me the movie on a flash drive. He also gifted me a book from his personal library that he thought I would like. We stayed in contact and I recently returned the favor by buying him a DVD off Amazon. It's been good. Our conversations are enriching and he's a sweet guy, just odd, as am I. He sort of switches between identities online, his real name, Jean, and then an Italian surname, and a fictional character from Gothic literature. He's very into dark romanticism. I knew him on Facebook under the name of the character, and for a while that was his email address as well, although last summer he started using an address based off his real name, so it was kind of a mix of the two. He can be hard to keep tabs on because he often disappears from Facebook without warning and then reappears as soon as he came. He's gone through 2 or 3 different accounts, all using the fictional character's name. It wasn't a surprise when he vanished sometime last fall, and I just kept my eyes peeled for him. Occasionally I do a search, and one day I found an account with his real name, although not one with the fictional character. There was no face pic, but that was typical. Since he sometimes uses his real name online as well, I added that person, figuring if he wasn't the right person, he would just decline my request / send me a message asking how we knew each other. When he accepted my request without asking me who I was, I figured it was him. This seemed to be confirmed when I first started messaging him in late February. Between then and now, we've exchanged just over 900 messages. I started things where they had left off, saying how it was good to see him back. I had just been thinking of him. I was going to email him something, but now I could do it over Facebook chat, etc. He greeted me warmly, and then when I sent him a YouTube video I thought he'd like, he proceeded to discuss it with me. He was a little less articulate than I remembered, but not so much that it became noticeable, except in hindsight. I think the incoherence isn't quite as glaring to me in French as well, since it's not my native language. And he was odd, but that was normal. In April, he returned to Facebook under the fictional character's name. We added each other and started Facebook chatting. I would chat with the two accounts indiscriminately. They were never online at the same time, so I would just talk to whichever one was on. Again, I noticed that something was off with Jean. He would say things that didn't make sense and then refuse to explain when I said I was confused. He would use flirtatious terms of endearment, which made me uncomfortable. He made a lot of typos that made it hard to follow him too. It was only later that I noticed all the typos, all the cryptic statements and non sequiturs. All the flirtation happened when I was talking to Jean, and not when I was talking to the account with the name of the fictional character. Likewise, all the most legit stuff happened with the fictional character account, like me getting his address to send him the DVD. He was just straight up nicer on that account too. I had some unpleasant arguments with real name Jean and only him. I didn't notice that at the time though, because there otherwise seemed to be a continuity between the two accounts. We discussed the same topics on both, and while the speech patterns were somewhat different, like I said, more lucid and friendly on the fictional character account, there were also notable similarities. The same Italian expressions got used, for instance. Real name Jean called me Bella Ragazza, a flirtatious gesture that made me slightly uncomfortable. Fictional character Jean, while making fun of a Roberto Alagna album cover, called him Bel Oyomo. They both used the expression no problemo at various points. They both complained about the French far right. It seemed seamless, until it wasn't. On Saturday, I saw real name Jean online and started chatting with him, asking him if he heard about all the stuff that had happened that week in the US. When I brought up marriage equality, he became very homophobic, which surprised me because I had known him to be a decent guy. We'd argued about non-binary gender before, but straight up vicious homophobia, slurs, etc., and it came as a shock to me. I started to fight with him and he became very hostile, saying nonsensical and paranoid things like, "If I come to your city, you'll hide with your friends so as not to show your face at the supermarket," and telling me to stop talking to him. None of this made any sense to me given our 4-year history, his past affectionate behavior, etc., and I asked him, "So we're not friends anymore?" trying to figure out what the hell was going on. He responded that friendship means nothing on the internet, which I found bizarre because we met in real life in the summer of 2011 and had been planning to meet again last year, except that he had been out of town. A while later, I saw that fictional character Jean had liked and commented on one of my photos. Another thing I only realized in hindsight was that all the likes and comments were from fictional character Jean, not real name Jean. I went to Facebook chat. Only real name Jean was on. I asked him why he was liking my stuff when he told me to stop talking to him. Furious, he responded that he hadn't liked anything. "Where do you see my name?" I said. "Well, not your real name, fictional character." He said, "So?" and told me to fuck off. At this point, I was reeling in confusion. What the fuck was happening? Was he having a dissociative episode? I resolved to talk to real name Jean when he came online to see how he acted towards me, and if he was civil, to confront him with his behavior under his other account. He came on early in the morning, and I rushed to talk to him, both deeply unsettled and dying of curiosity. "Hi, can I talk to you? It's kind of urgent," I said. Him. Urgent? Sure, what's up? "So when I was talking to real name Jean, you're the only one I'm talking to, right? This man is you." And I linked to the Facebook page. To which he responded, "Not at all. In fact, I don't have a Facebook account under my real name. This person is simply homonymous." He confirmed that he only been back on Facebook since April, the time when the fictional character account reappeared. He was pretty distressed to learn I'd been talking to this guy for 4 months thinking it was him, and even more distressed to know that the guy was a dick, and I thought even for a moment that he also was a dick. You're probably wondering how it took me so long to figure it out, and all I can say is that because I took for granted the real name Jean and fictional character Jean were the same person, it never even occurred to me that they might not be. Them being the same person was the null hypothesis, and the idea that they might not be, that real name Jean might be pretending, was so incredibly crackers that it never crossed my mind, not once. You're probably still wondering how I could simply have taken for granted that real name Jean was my friend when he gave so many hints that he wasn't. And I have to remind you the degree to which he simply went along with everything I said. I would talk about stuff specific to my friend, stuff that must not have made any sense to the man I will now call fake Jean, and he would act like he knew what I was talking about. The idea that he was lying, faking, or delusional was unthinkably bizarre. Today, after I walked home from school, I changed into my PJs and browsed Let's Not Meet, just like I do every single other day. Well, about an hour later, I get a message on Facebook from a weird account telling me to go outside. After investigating, I realized he messaged me before only saying hi, so half-asleep stupid me figures, why not? I'm not home alone, nothing will happen, right? Wrong. I go outside and see a tall guy with long hair and a Children of Bodom shirt on. I love Children of Bodom, so I figured he used to go to my school, but graduated since he didn't look that much older than me. He looked really happy to see me, so I figured I did know him, but I don't remember him. I have very bad memory, so I gave him a quick hug, but he hugged me a little longer than expected. Okay, I said to myself, kinda weird, but not really. "Oh my God, you're so beautiful." "Thanks. I was scared your Facebook pictures were going to be filtered." What the fuck? Around there, I realized I had no idea who this guy was, but he kept a firm grip on my hand. "Come to my car. It's over there." He pointed to a little broken down red car at the end of my block. "No, I have to take care of my sisters," I said. I was completely alone. "Come on, just for a while." He started pulling my arm, and my alarm bells were screaming. "No, I have to go." I pulled free and quickly turned to my house when he grabbed my wrists. He mumbled something, then grabbed my ass in a very tight grip. I'm 5'3" and he was like 6-something, so he was hovering over me. "Let me lick your asshole." What the fuck? I guess it was the fight-or-flight response that kicked in, and I just squirmed until I broke loose. He grabbed my face and tried to kiss me, but I lightly punched his shoulder and told him to get the fuck away. Thankfully, my neighbor from across the street saw everything and started screaming at him. He let me go and bolted to his car and sped off. My neighbor came over to me and asked me if I was okay and walked to my house and got me water and called the police. All we could provide is a small red Honda with a tall male with a COB shirt and long hair. They told me they'd call me if they found him to let me know I'm safe, yet they haven't called. I'm still scared, and I'm still grateful my neighbor was home early and I still have my sanity. I haven't had a lot of creepy things happen to me, but reading a few stories here reminds me of this event that happened just over a month ago. I sometimes receive random Facebook requests, and my general rule is to never accept a request from a stranger. Anyway, this random guy sends me a request and I already know we have never met, but curiosity got the better of me and I decide to skim over his profile. No big deal. As I'm scrolling down his main feed, I see my name pop up in a seemingly normal status. In that moment, I was quite taken aback. It was my full name, and although it's rather average, I know no one with it. Creepy, yes, but maybe it is just a coincidence, so I continue. Eventually, I come across another status describing how he'd like to be with a girl with my exact features, which include eyes, hair color, and skin color. Next, I find a fabricated text message conversation that made it look like I was involved with this guy. I also found a few statuses about romantic activities we shared that never actually happened. Of course, I noped the fuck out of there, but not before taking a few screenshots and blocking them. This person does live a few states over from me in another large city, but I keep my social profiles to private, so hopefully he doesn't contact me again. I realize now that I probably should have also reported the guy, but I honestly didn't want to provoke any kind of responses from him whatsoever. A little background. This guy added me on Facebook out of the blue when I was like 13. I'm 16 now. When I asked him who he was, he told me he saw my profile picture and thought I was beautiful and all that bullshit. Fast forward a year after we've been talking, and he tries hooking me up with one of his friends because you're so beautiful and he just has to have you. I declined several times because I had a boyfriend. When I posted a picture of us later, him and his friends started saying so many awful things to me in the comments section. After blocking all of them is when things got really creepy. They sent Google Map photos of my house. I had never given them my address and kept the location thing off at all times, and the guy I originally met threatened to cut my heart out. I blocked him and reported him. The next year he admits his undying love for me. He refuses to leave me alone. I finally just got rid of my Facebook and plan on making a new one. So, creepy guy from India, let's not meet. I'm an uninteresting man in my late 20s with a stable job and happy family. Being so, I had never even entertained the thought that I might, one day, be the target of a stalker. So here's my story as a warning to everyone. You don't have to be a typical, pretty young lady to catch the eye of a stalker. I don't know if this makes sense, but I am a habitual yet very casual Facebook user. I don't post a lot, but I do check my news feed often. One Saturday night, I was doing a quick round on Facebook before I went to bed when I received a friend request. I accepted it without hesitation. Just about every friend request I receive gets accepted because I don't ever post anything very personal. As I said, I have a very casual approach to social networking. I do a quick glance on the profile that had friended me and saw that it was an obviously fake account. Not thinking much of it, I put my computer away and fell asleep. The next day, I was having lunch at a friend's house, having completely forgotten about the friend request from the night before. My phone buzzed and I saw that I had gotten a message from a coworker of mine, Maya. Although Maya and I worked together and had a few mutual friends outside of work, we didn't communicate much other than when it was about work. I checked it, assuming it was work-related. I guess looking back, you can say it was. To get the gist of it, the Facebook account that friended me also friended Maya and had bombarded her with insults and accusations of being a whore, slut, and every name in the book. The person took it a step further by messaging Maya's husband, saying that she was cheating on him with a coworker. Maya wanted to know if I knew who the person was because I was the only other person that accepted the friend request. I explained to her how I accept every request and have no idea who it was. I then proceeded to unfriend the profile in question. Maya explained to me that she already had suspicions on who it was, but just wanted to see if I could confirm it. She believed it was Carrie. Let's rewind to a few weeks earlier. I had received a friend request from Carrie. It struck me as odd because, although we worked at the same place, we had never met, never spoken, nor had we ever made eye contact or been within 20 feet of each other. We worked in different departments, but I walked past her every day because I had to walk through her department to get to our lounge. That was the furthest extent of our interactions. I only learned her name from when she friended me on Facebook and I recognized her picture. I'm not sure how she found out my name. Carrie also friended my wife's profile and subsequently began to sift through years of my wife's posts and pictures, liking and commenting on several of them. She began interacting with my posts too, as though she knew us as well. At work though, I'd walk by like usual and still no interaction. I found it odd but didn't look too far into it. So back to the present, the mysterious Facebook account continued to harass Maya until she told her that she knew it was Carrie and was going to call the police. I thought that was the end of that, but boy, was I wrong. Over several weeks, I began getting more friend requests from girls looking to hook up with me. Obviously, I knew they were all fake, and for the most part, I ignored them. I also began getting notifications from Google and Facebook accounts about suspicious activity on my profile. Most of the time, it warned me of failed login attempts. One I specifically remember said my Facebook account was actually logged in from somewhere unusual and asked whether it was me. It wasn't me, and I should have been more concerned, but for some reason I didn't care at the time. I was stupid, and even after that, I didn't bother to change my password. At the time, I viewed all of these happenings as random, isolated incidents. I had no valuable stuff on my account and didn't have any private secretive messages. What harm could they do, right? A few months pass when one day my wife gets a message from Carrie stating that she had bought a high-end video camera and was looking to start some amateur filming. She wanted to know if we could help her by letting her film our family for a day. Remembering what Maya had said a few months ago, I was reluctant but wanted to give Carrie the benefit of the doubt, so we agreed to tell her that we'd schedule a time for her whenever we weren't busy and left it at that. Once again, I have yet to actually meet Carrie. More weeks pass by and we completely forget about scheduling the film shoot when Carrie messages me about it. I turn her down. Then things got weird. She sent several GIF files of stick figures doing sexually suggestive motions and gyrations. I didn't respond, so she asked, "Funny, isn't it?" I immediately texted my wife to log into my Facebook profile to observe the messages. Not wanting to be rude, I agreed with Carrie as of the humor in the GIFs she sent and carried on the conversation. She proceeded to send me old photos from my abandoned MySpace account that I had completely forgotten about. That was around the time when MySpace had been revamped and people lost a lot of cherished memories. Somehow she dug mine up and decided to share them with me. It was creepy to me. Things escalated quickly from there. She began talking about her body and how she wasn't attractive, trying to bait me into complimenting her looks. She was not beautiful, but she was an attractive person. I didn't bite though. Then she hit me with something out of the blue. She asked me about my penis, calling it my cock and suggesting that it was probably pretty big. I decided that was enough and stopped responding. Of course, my wife was reading the whole time and we were texting back and forth about how funny and weird this all was. I continued to go to work and still awkwardly never actually met Carrie. I especially didn't want to strike up any conversations after that. Carrie messaged me one final time asking for a favor. Maya had blocked her profile, and Carrie suspected that Maya was saying bad stuff about her, so she wanted me to check her profile to confirm. I told her that I wasn't going to stalk Maya for her, and that was that. Just between us, though, I did check, and no, Maya couldn't care less to waste her time talking about Carrie. Around this time, my wife got a text from an unknown number. The person knew her name but was trying to remain anonymous and was trying to flirt with her. We were with a bunch of friends at the time, and we all thought it'd be funny if we all text flirted with this person at the same time to annoy them. Once again, I never thought to connect any of the incidents. Carrie eventually quit work, and I never saw her again, but I continued to get suspicious activity and friend requests that I, stupidly, continued to write off. I had all but forgotten about Carrie. Then, I'd say over a year later, I get a bomb from my wife. A good friend of ours texted her that I was sending her very inappropriate messages on Facebook. I had been busy running errands all day and hadn't really checked my Facebook at the time. I found that my password had been changed when I finally logged back on. All of my messages had also been cleared. I had no idea the extent of what happened until I started hearing from people that I was being very suggestive and nasty to them. The thing was, these weren't random women on my friends list that were targeted. These were women that were close to me, good friends, my wife's sisters, my friends' wives. These messages weren't holding back either. They went all out in graphic detail about what I wanted to do to them. I felt completely violated and humiliated. I couldn't imagine how the women felt. My wife and I were really close to our families and friends, and every other week or so, all of our friends would get together and drink, BBQ, watch movies or sports, and hang out. We'd seen several families over and never had a problem. All of them said they understood what happened and that they know it wasn't me. Deep inside, though, I could see that they felt that it possibly, potentially, probably was me. Over time, more and more of them stopped coming over to the point where my home started to feel empty. I confided in my wife how I felt that they think it was me, and she rebutted that I was just being paranoid. She argued that our friends were just busy with their lives, that they'd eventually come over when they were free again. I then learned that someone had created a Facebook account using my name and picture and had continued harassing the same women. One of them posted a picture of the conversation with this false me on Facebook. She commented that it could really be me because that mystery person has used some words that I typically would. She also stated that the person knew my friends and family extensively. My heart instantly shattered reading that. I quit checking my Facebook for the longest time, and I guess I fell into a mild depression. I felt miserable. I told my wife that I wanted to disappear and strongly considered quitting my job of 7 years and moving away to start anew. I now know that I was being quite irrational, and thankfully my wife stayed strong for me through it all. I felt like I needed to defend my honor and started gathering alibis of times, people, and places I was around during the time of many of those messages. My wife brutally told me that she couldn't believe I was weak enough to let a no-life dumbass on Facebook put me down and make me feel that way. Which is true. I am and always have been a very mentally strong person. I always look for the best in a bad situation, but for some reason this affected me differently. I can't explain why, but I felt extreme shame and guilt for something I didn't even do. Without my wife's support knocking me back to reality, I don't know what would have happened. We advised our friends just to ignore the person, and eventually everything stopped. From time to time, I still get a random friend request, but I don't accept them anymore. I don't have any proof that this was all the work of Carrie. It just all happened during a time when she injected herself into my life and eventually stopped after she left. My friends have started coming over again, but it hasn't felt the same ever since then. I don't know if it's them or just in my head. My wife and I came to the conclusion that Carrie reveled in the misery of others. After tormenting Maya, she moved on and targeted me. trying to ruin my marriage and distance me from friends for no other reason than the fact that she enjoyed doing so. I'm sure she hasn't stopped and only left me alone because she found a new victim to harass.